Hello, this is Jimbo, and this is the introduction to part one of the David Kolb interview. There are two parts to it, and he's got a lot of stories to talk about. And we were at Offutt Air Force Base together in the Air Force, and we talked about our buddies there, influential people. He then went back to New York, which is where he was originally from. He was also part of the New York State Police and some other agencies out there. He talked about Antarctica, the survival training, wild stallion, ridge runner, and we just really had a good time reminiscing about our old buddies in the Air Force. And part two is pretty interesting. It's going to focus more on his police career and also quite the 911 experience. So sit back, relax for part one, and after that, we hope that you enjoy part two. Thank you. Hello, this is Jimbo, and this is YouTube channel Jimbo South Dakota, and this is the Hog House Chronicles. And I'm here with a friend from long ago, David Kolb. We're near Albany in Niverville, and we were in the Air Force together at Offutt Air Force Base in the middle 80s. It was a long time ago, and I hadn't got to see him for quite a while. And then our youngest daughter has moved and going to school here, and also part of the Air Guard unit here. And so we visited a couple years ago, and we got reconnected, and we came back again because she's got about a year's worth of school left, and talked to David, and he said yes to do this. So I was really, really happy because we've had a chance to talk some, but there's so much that I have not heard. So we're just going to go ahead and get that right here on the camera for everybody and his family and coworkers. And
well, it's good to have you. It's good to have you back in upstate New York, and I'm glad you and the family had a good Thanksgiving.
Yeah, and you as well.
We're all preparing for Christmas and New Year's, so that's already started, and here we are.
Yeah, so. Yeah. We're in his house. We're in his office. There's all kinds of things on the walls. It's a pretty cool office, and we'll also be putting in some pictures and things during edit. So as we're talking through some of the stories, he's got a thumb drive for me to put on my computer. I don't want to forget that at the end. And we will enhance the video. So if you're listening to just audio on Spotify, just know that you'll miss some of the visuals. But, So David got interested in the Air Force in the early 80s. And say whatever you want about your family.
I mean, this is my hometown, Niverville, town of Kinderhook, Columbia County, New York, about 25 miles southeast of Albany. We're on the good side of the Hudson River, and for those of you who don't know the area, it's a quiet little community. I think our town is probably close to 7,000, 8,000 people total. And we have the two villages, village of Valatia, village of Kinderhook here in the town, and they're what we're known famously here is village Kinderhook is the home of the 8th president, Martin Van Buren, and kind of mixing in my military career. Later on in my military career, every year on his birthday, if I recall, his birthday's December 5th. And I believe they do this nationwide with all U.S. presidents who've passed away, is that they will lay a wreath at the cemetery grave. And that's right down here in the village of Kinderhook. And usually it's a general officer that comes from the military. And because I live here, quite a few years, I was asked if I'd participate when I was a first sergeant. So, that's Kinderhook. I mean, right up the road from where we are is where I grew up, right on Kinderhook Lake. Great place to grow up and be a kid. I'm the youngest of four, girl, boy. And, my parents are gone. They passed away years ago. My brother, unfortunately, passed away about 8 years ago. So it's my two sisters and I.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah. And, my oldest sister is many ways my mother. She's the one that raised me. She's 14 years older than me. So, Shar, I love you. My older sister, Lori, she lives in the house we grew up in with her husband, Lauren, and their daughter. And yeah, this is it. This is all I didn't plan on living here. I mean, when I, you know, after the military, active duty time, when I met you, of course, and then, I got into my law enforcement career. I didn't plan on, I didn't really have like a set plan to live here. It just kind of the way it worked out and just timing with a lot of things, when my dad was sick in 1993, that's when I got out of the State Police Academy and went through my field training. And I knew I'd have the ability, if I did well, to get stationed here. This is, the State Police calls this Troop K. And so I decided to come back here because I wanted to be close to him. And I'm glad I did, because I didn't have a lot of time with him. I had, maybe 6 months before he passed away, but at least I had time. I was able to be close enough to him. I didn't get stationed in Syracuse or Buffalo or, Lake Placid or something like that. So it was nice to be close to home. But yeah, graduated from Ichabod Crane High School. It's another thing we're known for around this area is the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. For those of you familiar with that, as Washington Irving's story goes, it occurred here in Kinderhook, and the Legend of Ichabod Crane, and that's what our school's named after. The Ichabod Crane Riders is our school, and we all went there. My siblings and I, my kids even went there as well, and while I was in school, I knew since I was 10 years old that I wanted to be a state trooper. I knew that I was going to be a New York State Trooper, and a lot of people laughed at me. And they're like, oh, well, you better have a plan B and all that, and I didn't need one. I mean, I had one, but my plan B was to stay in the military, but I never gave up on that dream. But I knew since I was 10 that I was going to be a state trooper. And, but I knew you can't be a state trooper in New York till you're 21 and you graduate at 17. I graduated at 17. So it's like, all right, what am I going to do? Well, my family was all military. My father was a World War II veteran from the Army. Miss you, Pop. His twin brother was a Marine, World War II Marine. Their younger brother was World War II Navy veteran. He actually flew, he was a flight engineer, and flew PBY missions during the Midway campaign. If you've ever watched the movie Midway, you'll see the kind of, later on in the movie, as the battle kind of intensifies, you see that the U.S. Navy sends out PBY aircraft, and it's their call sign was Strawberry. Well, my uncle was in that. He flew that mission. And if you recall, the Japanese were northeast of the American position. His mission, his actual flight was to the southwest. So he was kind of completely opposite of where that went. So he wasn't involved in sighting the Japanese fleet or anything like that, but he was a Navy veteran. My cousin Skip, Marine Corps veteran in Vietnam. My cousin Elmer, Vietnam era Air Force veteran. And then, to round it out, I got a nephew who was in the Coast Guard, and I was originally looking at the Marines. And
were you?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I was originally looking at the Marines, and but a funny story, as things kind of, I'll just say this now. I'll finish that thought, but I'm a firm believer that people come into your life for a reason, right? And maybe it's just to kind of, you think about, and we talked about this when we were setting up. We talked about, I'm a very linear person, so I kind of look at things in that perspective, but. Even if it's just people come into your life just to kind of bump you this way or bump you that way, as you're going on your path of life, people just kind of come here and maybe knock you this way instead of going that way. No, your life's going this way now. And then maybe they knock you back this way or whatever. And so to get back to that story, a girl I was dating in high school at the time, her dad was an Air Force veteran in the 50s and 50s, early 60s. And he, he's like, oh, what are your plans? So I told him, and I wanted to be a state trooper, but I'm looking at the military because my parents didn't have money with us. Well, when I say we were poor, we did okay, but we didn't. My parents didn't make a lot of money. Both blue collar people. My mom went back to work when my sister Lori and I were like 10. My mom, she was a beautician. She had a beauty salon in our house that my dad built for her, but then she went back to work full time and. So we didn't have a lot of money. So I knew college really wasn't an option for me, just with the
Mm-hmm.
cost of it, you know?
Right.
And so I said, okay, I'm going to go into military and, you know, grow up a little bit, learn a trade, something that I can take with me, you know, for my ultimate goal to be a state trooper. So, you know, going back to this gentleman, you know, he's like, well, you know, the Marines, and you know, he made the kind of a joke. He goes, oh, you want to sleep in a foxhole every night? He goes, well, why don't you think about the Air Force? And I'm like, well, I don't know. So took my ASVAB test. You know, I qualified for everything in the Air Force. And so I said, well, I'm going to go in the Air Force. It sounds like it's a little more comfortable. And so I went in the Air Force, and, you know, and yeah, I graduated in June of 84 and went active duty in August of 84. And imagine San Antonio, Texas in August of 84. It was god awful hot, but we made it through, and graduated from there, and went to Chanute Air Force Base for our life support school, and wasn't really planning on life support. I wanted to be, you know, security forces, do law enforcement in the Air Force, and it just didn't happen for whatever reason, you know, the way the military works, you know. That's why they call it a dream sheet, right? You know?
Yep, exactly.
And so, but I did have life support on my career field requests, and it seemed interesting. So yeah, shipped off to Chanute Air Force Base, Illinois, in beginning of October of 84, and waited 2.5 weeks for a class to start. Started in the middle of October, graduated early December, came home, did my 2 weeks at home here, and then drove my 1970 Camaro out to Omaha, Nebraska, and showed up at Offutt Air Force Base on or around like the 21st of December of 84. And yeah, and that's where we went.
Yep, that was about a year after you.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you recall, I was your sponsor.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to take a little credit for all your success in life, you know?
Yeah.
But no, I took that. I remember that was like a big deal for me, you know, at that time. I was, you know, when did you get to Offutt? I forget.
It was beginning of February, I think, 86.
Okay.
So right.
So all right. So yeah. So I'd been there a little over a year, about 12, 13 months, say. I was 19, you know, and now they're giving me this responsibility of being a sponsor, you know, for a new airman coming in with a family, you know, what have you. And here I am. You know, I remember taking that very seriously. And I think back now and I laugh about it a little bit, and I think to myself, he probably just couldn't wait to get rid of me, because I was probably trying to dot every I, cross every T, and make sure that your transition into Offutt Air Force Base was absolutely seamless. And it's funny, you know, I look at myself now at 57, and I think of that 18, 19-year-old kid, and it's just like, dude, just calm down, man. You know, just calm down. But that's just who I was. And just
me growing up in very small town, South Dakota, married, young baby, and actually we hadn't had a baby yet, but I remember Steve Hughes, you weren't available, I think, right when we walked in that first day, and I remember Steve Hughes taking us around looking for apartments and things.
Yep.
And
yeah, I was
all the rest of
somewhere.
the stuff, and yeah, I was not a man of the world, you know, so any kind of guidance I could get, I was very appreciative.
Well, I mean, that's, you know, I know, knowing you as well as I do, you know, I know your small town upbringing is very similar to mine, you know, and this area here, like I literally live a half a mile from my childhood home. And, you know, this, I always tell people this was such a great place to grow up. And if you can visualize this for people listening, you know, I'm kind of where I live, I'm kind of right on an intersection between a county road, which kind of runs east-west, and then a town road that runs north-south, but it dead ends because of Kinderhook Lake. It's basically a peninsula that goes in that direction from where I'm sitting right now. And it dead ends, and that's Hawley Road that dead ends up on the lake, and it's just truly a peninsula, right? So I'm about, I don't know, maybe halfway up, 2/3 of the way up on the left. Mm-hmm. So I'm on the east side, basically, or the west side, excuse me, of the lake. And so growing up as a kid, the rules were very simple. That whole neighborhood was your playground. Mm-hmm. But you couldn't, there was like two things that my mother was adamant about. One, you'd never come out to Parker Hall Road, which is the road that I live on. So you could go all the way down Holly Road, but you could not go out on Parker Hall Road. And somehow she always knew when we were on that road. I know she got friends out here, but they just did. I mean, their network was just insane, you know. And you couldn't cross the railroad tracks because, you know, to the west of us is the railroad tracks, and you couldn't cross the railroad tracks. But anywhere else, it was fair game. You know, we'd ride our bikes back here, play, kick the cans, you know, do all that, and definitely a great place to grow up. It really was, and
pretty safe area too.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I mean, the thing about that neighborhood, we call it, the locals will call it the Hawley Pines area. It's not an HOA or anything formal like that. It's just, you know, there was originally a Boy Scout camp that was built. I know it was back in the 20s or something like that. And then eventually they, the Boy Scouts sold it, and a lot of that property was just, you know, purchased by somebody and then subdivided. And my parents' house back there is the second oldest house in that neighborhood. It was built in 55, right? 55. Yeah. Because my brother was born in 54, and he was a baby when they moved in there. And my father built it by hand. I still have the original hammer that he built my parents' house with. It's in my toolbox in the porch. Yeah. So, yeah, great area, small town, you know, just a great place to grow up. You know, your typical teenage miscreant activities that occur, you know, I mean, it happens, you know, it just does. But, yeah, you know, kind of segueing it back to what you're talking about, you know, when you're arriving to a place. I mean, hell, my first time on an airplane was when I flew to basic training.
Same here.
You know?
Yeah.
And, you know, I never knew how to shine shoes. I had a kid from Chicago in my basic training flight who I'm sitting there literally on the bunk. You know, you go buy your shoe shine kit, you know, at the PX there, and you sit there and they tell you to shine your boots. And I'm just sitting there, I'm looking at my boot, I'm looking at my brush, and I'm looking at my can of shoe polish, and I'm like, what the fuck do I do now? I don't know how to shine shoes. I never wore shoes. I wore sneakers like my whole life, you know? I mean, and he's looking at me, and he starts laughing. He goes, "What's the matter?" I go, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do this. I've never shined a shoe in my life. He goes, "Come here, bring your shit over here. Come here." So we sit down next to him, and he's teaching me how to shine shoes. I mean, I just never knew. I just, you talk about that sheltered life that we lived growing up, you know? And so yeah. And that was, you know, a kind of a lesson I learned from that is don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
You know,
no doubt.
Don't be afraid to ask for help. I mean, I just, yeah. I mean, you know, there's no reason to, you know, you talk about checking your ego. And I mean, it's just you know, maybe I didn't learn it at that moment, but I kind of reflect back on it now. And it's like, yeah, I learned that along the way. It's like, you know, you don't know what you don't know. And I'll be the first one to say, hey, look, and I've carried this throughout my whole life, and not only in the military, but in my law enforcement career. If you don't know something, ask. You know, I mean, there's always somebody you're working with that knows the answer. Go find it. Just go find the answer and save yourself some trouble, and kind of check your ego, and don't worry about it. So
building relationships at the same time.
Exactly. And, you know, I mean, look at us. I mean, we've known each other over 30 years, and, you know, it's like, you know, you learn. And again, I'll go back to that comment I made about how I'm a firm believer that people come into your lives for a reason. And, you know, even that young man from Chicago came into my life for a reason, even if just to teach me how to shine shoes and do something like that. And that's, you know, again, I truly believe that about, and I could look on my whole life, reflect on my whole life, and people come into my life for a reason and have helped me along the way. And, you know, some people have come into my life, and maybe their presence in my life was ended badly. You know, it could be a relationship, whatever, or, you know, personal relationship, could be a professional relationship or whatever. But if you learn something along the way, hopefully that makes you a better person. And I truly believe that. So, but I mean, you think about our time in Nebraska together. I mean, that's where I really grew up. I mean, you had a shop. We were 45 at the time, with second largest life support shop in the Air Force, if I recall, I think is what they were telling us.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I mean, that's, you know, back then, I mean, we were a wing level. So, you know, we serviced, I can't even remember how many squadrons we had that we serviced, but we weren't a squadron level life support back then. We was a wing level. So we served everybody. We were 1,000 crew members, I think, on base. And, you know, we had 16 permanently assigned generals on our base, and a lot of TDY generals to come in and fly the Looking Glass mission. And I forget the numbers. I remember when you were interviewing Bob Lathrop, I was watching your podcast and you guys were talking about the numbers, and I think the numbers you guys were actually using were a little higher than the ones I remember, but what the hell did I know? I was 19, you know?
Yeah. As far as crew members, I thought he was a little high on that, but it was, this number sticks out in my head, but it's still over 1,000 air crew members. Was 1,043. Always just stuck in my head when I left there.
Yeah.
It might have just been counting. Maybe that was just the chem bags, not all the active flyers.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but yeah, it was big, and I had no idea of, you know, you're talking wing level, squadron level. I mean, I learned the basic things in basic training, but a lot of it just went. And,
Sure.
And I couldn't apply it right away to where I was. I was like, this is my job.
Yeah.
There's my boss. Let's get this done for this guy, so this guy's happy, you know.
It was a great experience. I mean, you think about our time in Nebraska. Think about who we were as a shop. It didn't matter. We had male, female. We had white guys. We had black guys. We had Hispanic guys. It didn't matter. I mean, it really didn't. You know, and it growing up. I mean, here, very white neighborhood. This is, you know, we had a couple black families. That live in the neighborhood. They still do. You know, grew up with them. A couple were my age, so you know, watched. Some have moved away, some haven't. You know, but just, you know, back when I was growing up here, it's a more diverse now. The neighborhood around here is the town is now than it was when I was a kid, and that's cool. You know, it's great. I mean, hey, it's a good place to raise your family. So I don't care who you are. It's a great place to raise your family and have a good life. But my exposure to many different races and many different cultures was really in Nebraska. And, you know, you kind of joke, well, Nebraska, it's the middle of the country, you know, it's corn, it's all corn, right? You know, but it really was. And I learned so much from so many people, and just how people live differently. And, you know, we had guys from Texas. We had guys from the Bayou. We had guys from California. You know, you talk about Steve Hughes, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and Steve, you know, I've lost touch with him over the years. I hope, Steve, if you're listening, I hope you're doing well, brother. But I remember Steve was into like Oingo Boingo and that kind of music, you know.
I remember that.
Remember,
yeah.
you know, and at the time I laughed. I was like, who the hell is this, right? And yet, you know, but now, hey, full disclosure, I love that kind of music. I mean, again, my musical likes are very diverse as well. And a lot of that, I think, is because I really had, I just, with living with and growing up and working with all these people, it just really kind of opened your eyes to so many different things, you know, country music, you know, rap wasn't really a thing back then. It really didn't come out until like more the late 80s, early 90s. And I was already gone by then, you know, but, you know, we obviously, you know, we had guys in the shop that listened to country music, listened to kind of new wave, that, you know, that new wave, Oingo Boingo kind of thing, if you will, you know, regular traditional rock music, which is what I grew up on. You know,
Big
my brother,
bands.
yeah, even me for me going back to the 60s, you know, my brother was a musician. My brother could play guitar, was great. And, you know, I started banging on the drums when I was 6. My dad had a drum set that was given to him. He brought it home. We set it up. I was playing that. And then, but, you know, my brother played guitar, and he could sing. I mean, it was great. He used to, you know, he'd sing for my sister Lori and I. And, you know, but he was very much, you know, he wasn't quite old enough to go to Woodstock. You know, he was only, I think maybe he was like 14 at the time, 15. And maybe he could have. My parents wouldn't have let him.
Yeah, could imagine.
But he was very much, you know, me growing up was very much 60s music, late 60s music, that Vietnam music, if you will, you know, in the 70s. that's the music I listened to. And then of course I was a kid of the 80s, the hair bands and all that stuff. You know, the, so, so I kind of got the point I'm trying to make is that, Jim, is that the exposure that we had at just the cultural exposure, the different things, it was fascinating. It really was. And maybe I'm, unfortunately, being young, I don't know that I really recognized it immediately, but I was able to draw on those experiences, those memories later in my life,
And I just loved how everybody got along. I mean, we
God, it was
just
great.
met everybody, all different cultures. We'd go to the same parties, the social life.
Kevin Snyder's for every Friday.
Oh, yeah.
Snyder, if you're listening, I miss you, brother.
He actually moved. He's pretty close
He's
to
in
me
Kingsley, Iowa. Yeah,
I'm trying to get
I keep in
him,
touch with him.
Mike Rastetter and Tom Boyer. I'm trying to get you three together.
Oh, that would be a good
that'd
time.
great, especially if they could come up to the Hog House.
You let me know. I'll fly out there for that.
Will you?
Yeah, 2018. Speaking of those guys, 2018, I flew out to Nebraska Memorial Day weekend. Actually visited with Tom and Tracy. I don't know if you remember, I was in their wedding, and Tom and I were roommates. And again, when you mentioned those guys, I mean, Mike Rastetter came a little later. He came to Offutt kind of I was kind of leaving. I was getting ready to leave. So, but I did get to golf with those guys when I was out there. Kevin unfortunately couldn't make it. I think he had a family issue back in Illinois. Yeah, it's just amazing. I think about it. Christ, 5 years has gone by already since I was there, and the base has changed so much. But Tom and Tracy and I and Mike, even, we were talking about some of the stuff going on in the shop, and just, you're right. I mean, to your point, everybody got along. I mean, really, I don't remember too many beefs in our shop. Everybody just got along, and maybe that was because we all adored Chief White. I don't know. Nobody wanted to disappoint him. It's just like he set the tone. And again, he was there when you were there.
Yes.
And because I know he had transferred, he transferred out, he made chief, and he went to the 3rd Tactical Fighter Wing in the Philippines. And I got some photos actually of his going away party. Yeah, I mean, he set the tone early on, and he just, everybody, and I think everybody just realized, hey, it's just, we had a good time. I mean, maybe there was some dust ups here and there, and this guy didn't like that guy, or
you always have that.
We had arguments, but it was, I kind of reflect back on it. It was more like kind of brothers arguing with each other.
That's what I was thinking.
You think?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was, if you think about it, it really was, okay. Yeah. I remember, Dan Murphy. Murph, love you, brother. We stay in touch on Facebook. Your
good.
twins, good job this year with your twins. Congratulations, they did well. I remember him and I having a dust up one day down on the flight line, right? And I don't know, it was probably just a difference of opinions over something at the end of it. And then Larry Hill, remember Larry?
Oh, I know Larry very well.
Larry, and I'll tell you a great Larry Hill story in a minute. But Larry comes up, puts his arms around both of us, like, bro. California kid. Look, man, it just don't matter. Let's just go all have a beer, and let's just be okay. And it was like, it was done. It was done. You're right. This doesn't matter. It was trivial at the time, and we all went and had drinks and had a lot of drinks that night, probably, because that was the tone, and we just got along.
Larry just retired. He was the only full-time life support aircrew flight equipment guy in the nation.
Yeah.
And he just retired. And the podcast that's coming out, probably just prior to this one, the 4 guys, first time we did one at the bar in the Hog House, it wasn't a practice. They all know him, some just by phone. But so old Larry's been mentioned a few times on.
Well, I'll throw my Larry Hill story in right now, if I may. So Larry was, when Larry came to Offutt, Larry was my roommate in the dorm. Okay. So we were roommates in the dorm, building 400, which is just a plot of grass now. But Larry, great. We got along great, good, and then eventually he moved out. He went down to the Dewdrop Inn down in Plattsmouth with Murph and oh God, who was it? Oh, Carl Gustafson. They moved into the house in Plattsmouth, and then and I moved out, and Tom and I got an apartment in the middle of Omaha. So Larry and I hadn't seen each other in, I mean, I left in 88. I left Offutt in 88. And then, cause I transferred immediately to the Air Guard. Cause I want to get out and continue my pursuits as, to be a New York State trooper. And so now I'm in the Air Guard, I'm in the 109th. Right. And so fast forward to 2002, I think it was. I'm now, obviously when I transferred to the Air Guard, and I can talk more about that in a second, but I was in life support. And then I became, in 1999, I became the squadron first sergeant for the airlift squadron. And so I was in Antarctica. I was running the first sergeant program for the 109th Airlift Wing. And you get down to Christchurch, New Zealand before you go to Antarctica. I don't know if you know anything about Operation Deep Freeze and all that. So, I get into Christchurch, land, get set at the hotel. We stay at the Commodore Hotel. The operations guys stay at the Commodore, get changed. I got to report down to the DET. We call it the DET 13, Detachment 13. I mean, it's all changed now. It's all
right.
Support Forces Antarctica and all that. It's all under PACOM. But back when it was still like a guard mission, reported to the DET. So I'm walking through the hangar, and off to my left, there's just bags and bags of all this life support equipment in the hangar. And there's a guy working on I don't know if he was working on, I think it was anti-exposure suits or something like that. And I'm walking along, and I just kind of look over and I'm like, hey, what's up? And, and I keep on walking because I got to go report to the DET 13 commander and my mission commander who had come in on another flight, and I just stop. And I know that guy. And now again, I haven't seen Larry in years.
Right.
Right. And so I back up, I look at him, and he looks at me, and I'm like, holy shit, dude. and we can't, like, oh my God, this is great stuff. And so we hung out, I was in New Zealand for a couple of days because, it's the weather in Antarctica can be quite fickle in late September, early October to get in. And I was on the Advon team. So, we were there for, I think, an extra day or two. So Larry and I hung out because he was there with his reserve unit. They were flying, I think, 141s at the time out of March. And, so he had gone down, and it was a new thing for them to actually keep guys, on the ground in Christchurch. And so he had deployed and was doing their scheduled maintenance on some of their equipment. And so we got to hang out for a couple of days together, and it was awesome.
Very cool.
And, yeah. And,
he's a lot of fun.
He's a good time. Yeah. And so, yeah, it was, and so, yeah, we stayed in touch over the years and stuff like that, but it was just cool how, that life support, that family we grew up with is, late teenagers, early 20s, that you can stay in touch. And, but that's my Larry Hill story. So, brother, I love you, man.
Yeah. And Larry Brass ended up being, was it police?
Yeah, he's a sergeant with the Tampa PD.
Together.
Well, we connected through Facebook.
Did you?
And I tell you, people say what you want about social media, but it's got its good and its bad. But for me, and it's very bad. I mean, obviously my law enforcement career, I've seen the bad side of things, and and that included, the cyberbullying, the things that go on like that, and just people can't help themselves. They hide behind a keyboard, and keyboard commandos, as I like to call them. But the good thing about it, especially for me as Facebook in particular, is because I have reconnected with all you guys.
Yes.
That I served with on active duty. I mean, within a week, I think I reconnected on Facebook with Kevin, Tom Boyer, Bruce Orman,
and
Vicky. Yep. And I'm sure there's others, and Larry was one of them later on. I mean, we all, and I'm sure if I forget anybody, I apologize, but man, it's just Bob Lathrop. I mean, we're friends on Facebook, and just the ability to be able to, and Tom Frederick. I don't even know if Tom's still alive or not anymore, but I reconnected with him on Facebook, and I haven't talked to him in years. I mean, he did call me a couple times on the phone. I remember back in 2010, I think it was, Kevin was trying to put together a reunion, a life support reunion.
Right.
And I was 2011. I know it was 2011, and I was all ready to go. And then like a month before the reunion, my back decided to blow out on me, and I had to have L4, L5 surgery, so I couldn't fly.
Wow.
And I missed the reunion, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we were on a family vacation
Yeah.
that we'd planned for a year, so I missed it.
But the cool thing is, though, we've all been able to reconnect, and, you know, just to be able to see, okay, they're doing this and they're doing that. And, you know, I remember Kevin and Tammy's, the pictures. I never went to visit, but their house in Northern California was just
Oh yeah,
gorgeous.
in Paradise. I
Yes.
believe.
And then unfortunately, right after well, however you want to look at this, fortunately, unfortunately,
Right.
whatever the case may be, right after they sold it, was like, what, less than a year after they sold it, that god awful fire went through and just burned that whole area of Northern California, and everything was lost. And
Yeah.
but just to see what people are up to, you know, and Bruce and Vicky, you know, Bruce was my reporting official. I mean, he was the one who wrote my APRs back in way back when, and I was in their wedding, Bruce and Vicky's wedding. And, you know, I remember, you know, reconnecting with them, and they were in, and then they opened up their pizza ranch, restaurant, and I got to watch that all from afar. And that was really awesome. And then, you know, their kids and now their grandparents and all of that. And now they're living out in Washington State, out on the ocean, I believe. And
Yeah, and Vicky was in our shop too. So
yeah,
part of the
she
buzz.
was. Yeah, she's part of the crew, and it was it's just awesome to be able to connect with people that were part of your childhood, that, you know, now live in, you know, we're spread across the country, and it's really cool. So from in that respect, I really enjoy. That's what I think I enjoy the most about Facebook, is to be able to see kind of what my friends are up to, that, you know.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. Use your powers for good, not evil. So.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You know, and even my state police family, you know, we and my guard family too. You know, a lot of my guard family. You know, when I left active duty in '88, you know, I actually had orders to go to the 105th Airlift Wing in Newburgh, and because I was going to be a loadmaster. And I don't know if you recall or not, but the 105th back in the late '80s went through a monster transition. They were originally flying the OV-10, which is, I don't know, one pilot maybe and a co-pilot. I think it's a two-seater, maybe it'll be a single-seater, but it was an observation aircraft. You know. Kind of the old FAC aircraft from Vietnam, you know, and they transitioned to C5s. So think about this. They went from the smallest aircraft in the inventory, okay, to the largest.
Right.
And so they became a C5 wing. So they needed everybody. They needed flight engineers. They needed loadmasters. They needed everybody. And when I originally had contacted the 109th, because it's closest to my house, I mean, from where I live here, you know, the 109th is in Schenectady, and it's like 40 miles from my house, and Newburgh's like 75, 80 miles from my house, maybe even further. But I contacted the 109th to see if they had openings in life support. And the guy I spoke to, who has since become one of my mentors in life, Jerry Stoddard. Chief, if you're listening, hope you're doing well. He was the NCOIC of the shop at the time. He was an E7 Master Sergeant. And he was the NCOIC of the shop at the time. And at the time when I spoke to him, because I called him, you know, from Offutt, he had said, look, I don't have any openings. You know, our shop is full right now. And I'm like, okay. And so I said, all right, you know, I appreciate it, you know, and what have you. So I looked at, you know, went and spoke to people at, you know, on base at Offutt. You know, people are helping you kind of, I forget their name, but the people are helping you transition, you know, to the guard and what have you. And they're like, well, what about the 105th? You know, they're going through this big upgrade now, and they really need loadmasters. And I was like, yeah, that'd be kind of fun. You know, flying would be kind of cool. You know, maybe that was a premonition of where my state police career eventually took me. But so I did. I reached out and got in touch with them, and I had orders in hand to go to the 105th. And then, I don't know, it was maybe 3 weeks before I was ready to PCS. Jerry calls me on the phone. He's like, hey, it was Master Sergeant Stoddard from the 109th Airlift Wing. I don't know if you remember talking to me a while ago, but we have an opening in life support. We have a guy who's leaving. So I was given approval to hire you as a projected loss. And I was like, what's that mean? He goes, you can come in the shop. He goes, I've got an opening. And I'm like, well, I already have orders to go to the 105th. I'm going to become a loadmaster. And he goes, oh, do you want to do that? And I go, well, yeah, it sounds like fun. He goes, well, you're going to have to go away to school. You know all that, right? And I go, yeah. And so, because I had told him I wanted to become a New York State Trooper. And actually his dad, Harvey Stoddard, was a retired New York State Trooper and then was the Schoharie County Sheriff for 20 some years. And he came into my life later on. That's where I started my law enforcement career before I became a trooper. And so, but Jerry's like, well, look, you won't have to go away to school or anything. You come right here and we'll just OJT you because it's different. You're working on different equipment. You're in a 135 world, we're a 130 world, that kind of thing. And I got thinking, I was like, yeah, this sounds great, and it's closer to home and all that. And he started explaining their mission. At the time, they weren't in Antarctica, or they had just actually 1988 was the first year they had gone to Antarctica for like a couple of weeks. They went to support the Navy, but their primary mission was Greenland, and so they didn't have a combat mission at the time. Different world than we have now, but that's what I did. I said, well, what do I do? He goes, well, if you want to come here, you'll have to get your orders amended to come to the 109th. So that's what I wound up doing. And when I PCS'd, I PCS'd on the 28th of March in 88, and I transferred right to the Guard. And I drove home. This was just basically packed up my stuff, drove from Nebraska, drove here. And I went up in like a week later, I think it was like 6th of April or whatever, 7th of April, and I got sworn in at the Guard unit. So no break in service, and they put me right on home station training orders, and I started at the 109th, but I remember going back to Nebraska in '89. Jerry had given me an opportunity to go out to St. Joe, Missouri. It was J.B. Wattsbaugh, if I remember his name correctly. Was the shop chief out at the Guard unit at St. Joe, Missouri, the 130 unit, and they had a new piece of equipment that Jerry wanted me to go and look at and write a report up on. And I think it was really just an opportunity for him to let me get back to the Midwest and go see my friends in Nebraska. But I did.
Both of those guys, my first time meeting them was because they both became the career field functional manager for life support.
Yeah,
air flight equipment. So I met them later in life.
Jerry and JB. Yeah,
yep.
Yeah. They again, I knew that they were both. I knew obviously, Jerry as his career progressed, and he became a senior master sergeant, then a chief master sergeant, and then he left the 109th and went down to Guard Bureau and what have you. And I knew that JB was doing something similar. I think his path in life was a little similar. I don't really know too much about him, but he was very kind and very intelligent on what, we were doing in the 130 world. And, but I did get an opportunity to go back in the summer of '89. I did my annual training and went to St. Joe, Missouri, and then was able to grab a car and go back up to Omaha and see everybody and see the shop. And that was my last time I was there until 2018. And now, our shop is a parking lot. The dorms are gone. It's just like the base has changed so much. I follow the Offutt Air Force Base Facebook page, so I get to see what's going on out there. And just, I know it's not this 55th SRW anymore. It's the 55th wing and, things like that. So
I think the shop was chopped up and in different areas based on the job that they were doing specifically. But
and that's what Tom had said when Tom and Tracy had drove me around the base. They showed me all the buildings that were built and how they realigned life support, and it's now a squadron level function, and if I recall, and what have you. But hey, look, times change. You gotta change with the times.
The only thing constant is change.
Exactly, 100%.
A lot of old memories there, though. You drive around and things are gone and different,
the whole bypass was at what do they call that outside the base now? The 73, 75 bypass or whatever it is. That wasn't there. Like, I got lost.
Yeah.
when I flew into Omaha, I rented my car, and I'd like to think, all right, well, hey, I'm a cop. I know where the hell I'm going. I can figure this out. Right. And I start looking and I'm like, how the hell do I get to the base? And I'm like, this isn't the way to the base. And Tom had said, hey, look, things have changed a lot since you've been here, and he's like, when are you coming over? You know, because I had his address and stuff. And I said, I'm just going to drive around a little bit. You know, I want to just kind of take it all back in and see things. And I remember driving over to Council Bluffs, Iowa. You know, I wanted to see if I could find the Depot Lounge. Did you ever go there?
No, I didn't.
It was a bar. And back then, the drinking age was 19 in Iowa, and it was 21 in Nebraska. So I am not 21 years old at the time. So guess where I was going?
Exactly.
Me, Steve Hughes, Larry Hill, Scott Hobson.
The non-married guys.
Yeah. So we would go, that's where we went. We'd go over to Council Bluffs, Iowa, and the place to go was the Depot, or the Depot Lounge, it was really called, but everybody called it the Depot.
Right.
And that's where we all went to drink, because you were 19 and you could drink and dance to 80s music, you know. And that's what they did. They played music videos on a screen for like MTV music videos, and that's what you danced to, right? And so, and then the base, you know, the Air Force base or the military, maybe it was a DOD thing, I don't know, but the military had changed their rules and said, well, if the military installation is within 50 miles of a state line where that other state has a lower drinking age, we'll make that the drinking age on base. So the drinking age on base at the time was 19, but you can only drink beer.
Right.
You couldn't drink hard liquor because, like, you know, you're not going to get as drunk on beer as you are hard liquor. Made no sense to me, but whatever. It still doesn't make any sense to me, but whatever. So yeah, so sometimes we'd stay on base and you could drink, you know, at the Airmen's Club or the NCO Club and things like that. But, you know, yeah, we'd predominantly go over to Council Bluffs, Iowa, because none of us were 21. So
and it wasn't that far.
No, it really wasn't. I mean, what was it, like 15 minutes? So anyway, so I get to Nebraska, you know, in 2018, and I get my rental car, and I'm going over, and I'm trying to find the Depot Lounge, and I think I find it. And Tom's like, look, it's gone, man. It's gone. You're not going to find it. It's gone. And I'm like, well, I'm going to try to find it. And I think I found it, like where it used to be. And it was like just sitting there and just thinking about all the great stuff that we did as a group, you know, and just all the fun that we had. It was awesome. You know, just those memories, all like things I just kind of forgotten or just kind of put on a shelf for years, just kind of came back to me. And I'm just sitting there. I must have sat there, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, just like, wow, this is just great, you know? And then, so I make my way back over to Nebraska, and I start going down towards Bellevue, and wow, that all changed. That was crazy how much it changed.
Yeah,
and,
a lot.
you know, building 500, that's all gone, you know, or they're building a new one now, and the Stratcom gate. I mean, that was just a small nothing gate that, you know, the SAC headquarters gate when I was there, you know, went up to the hospital, and, I forget the name of the housing place for base housing and all that. K-Part. That's it. Yes. But yeah, I mean, that's all. I mean, it was amazing how much Tom wasn't kidding. I saw him like, dude, you weren't kidding, man. This place really did change. He goes, I told you. And he goes, it's grown up so much, and they built that bypass. And now you got to come off the bypass and make your way over to the gate. What was it? The Kenny gate? That's the one where all the flags are, and they got the B-52 sitting there. None of that was there, you know, and what have you. It's just, yeah, it's like, wow. It's like, damn, this place just changed so much. And the base, I mean, just the softball fields that used to be what's now the parade grounds and all of that. We had softball fields there. That's where, you know, the life support team had its own, we had our own softball team. We were so big, we could put our own softball team on the field. And, you know, all these other squadrons are getting uniforms and they all look cool. Well, I don't know who came up with it. Maybe it was Rudy McAllister. I don't know. But whoever came up with it is like, we're not doing that. We're life support. We're different. So we all agreed to go buy the ugliest Hawaiian shirt that you could find. And that was your softball uniform. Yeah. And we all wore just sweatpants or shorts, you know, whatever it was. Dwayne Grizzard. I don't know if you remember.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
May he rest in peace.
Yes.
You know, I think it might have even been his idea. I don't know, but it was classic.
I think he liked his Hawaiian shirts because at most of the parties, especially at Snides, I think he had a Hawaiian shirt on.
He did. So I think that was the nexus for our softball uniforms. But it was, you know, I mean, yeah, we just, you know, I get on base and driving around, or Tom, actually, no, Tom, I drove around by myself, I think the first day, and then the second, maybe it was the first day, I can't recall now, but I remember I was with Tom and Tracy in their truck, and Tom showed me around everything, and he's like, yeah, he goes, that's where our dorm was. And I was like, fuck, that's gone. That one's gone. That one's gone. It's just like, that whole area is just nothing anymore, And I look over at we walk over the parade grounds. I'm like, oh, where the hell's the softball field? He goes, that's gone, dude. He goes, they got a softball complex over by the E4 hangar now, and that's where everything is, I was like,
it seemed like they were building that area up a little bit more.
Yeah. So but it was great. It was great to go back, and I wish I was able to stay longer. I had to actually change my flight arrangements and leave a day early. Just shit happened, and I just had to go. But I was able to go golf with them at their home golf course, and I had a blast. And they were very patient with me with my golfing skills, and I'm much better, bro. I promise, I'm better.
I wasn't playing softball, but did you remember playing flag football?
I did. We played flag football, and you call it flag football. You throw somebody on the ground and rip their flag off.
Yeah,
but you
I
call
had
it
some
flag
troubles
football
with elbows and stuff.
Yeah,
I couldn't get used to not having pads.
We'd go off base and play at a softball field. And actually, talking about Mike Rastetter, I'll tell you kind of not one of my prouder moments, but I actually got into a little dust up with him and punched him in the face at one of those football games. And I apologized to him, Mike. I did. I felt horrible. I felt horrible then. I feel horrible now. But when I went out to Nebraska in 18 and we golfed, I said, hey, man, I owe you an apology. And he laughed at me. He's like, we were kids. I'm like, no, man, I owe you an apology. I got to make this right. I said, that was not cool. I lost my head. I just, and I should have never done that. And he's like, it's all good, man. So we shook hands and had a beer, and hopefully it's behind us.
Oh yeah. Mike's a great guy. All those guys we're talking about.
He's a good golfer too. He's a good golfer. I mean, I watched him just, I don't know much of golfer, your listeners golf, but we're after we're done, we're at one of their friends' houses, and and the house is right on the golf course. It's really cool. The house is kind of around the golf course, and Mike and with somebody else, I don't remember. I'm sure I was introduced, but I don't remember. And I'm watching them, and there's, right by this house we were at is one of the greens, for one of the holes, and these guys are just chipping golf balls with their, lob wedge or a sand wedge, whatever they were using. And I'm watching these guys just stick these golf balls like 4 or 5 feet from the pin. They're actually having a contest, see who can get closer.
Oh man.
And I'm looking at this and I'm like, fuckers, I'd like to be able to just get the ball on the green, and I was like, wow, he is a really good golfer. He stripes the ball. I hope your game is still as good as it was back then, Mike, or he's gotten better. But, I remember the football games off base. And then, I was trying to remember Mumbly Peg. Do you remember?
I wondered at Snide's place.
I don't remember. I remember. I see pictures of Kevin playing it. Playing it, and obviously it's with a knife, and and there's usually alcohol involved.
Oh, yeah.
and I don't
loose teeth.
I don't remember the concept of it. I tried it a couple of times, and lucky I still have all 10 fingers and 10 toes.
Yeah, it was something to do with flipping a knife off your nose, but then how close you were to the peg. But then if there's one thing that didn't work out or you didn't do right, you had to try to take the peg out of the ground with your teeth.
Yes.
And I remember the gal he was with at the time, and she knew I was new. I was green. I was small town, half-mile town, South Dakota. And I had mistook one thing also, where something like if the knife was flipping, but it wasn't going right, if you could catch it in the air before it hit the ground, then it didn't count.
Right.
Well, I had misunderstood something, and I didn't like what was going on, and I was just catch it. And they'll just look at me, what are you doing? So then told me how to do it, and I did this, and I'm like, dang it, I got to try to pull that peg out. And the gal he's with at the time, she goes, oh, don't worry, if you can't get it, Kevin will take care of you. Because I was like, I don't know what happens if I can't get that thing out of the ground. And because I was trying, and I had something coming just a little loose, and they took care of me.
Discretion's the better part of valor. But yeah, I mean, I either just didn't take a shine to it or I was god awful at it. Whatever it was, it didn't matter. But it was another one of those cool things that I think about when we were all, young adults and the things that we did, and just the guns. We always seemed to have guns at the parties, and everybody was safe, but everybody had guns.
Well, it's like a gun show. I mean, Snide's
Yeah.
got all kinds. You see him on
Yeah.
Facebook now.
Oh, yeah.
Talking about the guns he's
Yeah.
got, modifications,
Sure.
the training.
Oh, he
that
does. He
with that.
does an incredible amount of training. I wish, I mean, I've always felt very comfortable with firearms, and I always felt like I'm, very, I could pretty much pick up anything, clear it, make it safe, shoot it with no problem. But I look at some of the training that he does, and it's like, that's next level stuff, and that's excellent. I was never one, especially, I mean, to me, they're a tool, and in the right hands, they're fine, and in the wrong hands, they're not fine, right? And that's really how and I'm not, I like in my state police career, I've been troopers with guys that I'll call them gun guys. They, that's their thing. They have a lot of guns. And that's cool. If that's your thing, it's fine with me. I don't care. I have three guns in this house. I have one handgun. That's my off-duty weapon that I had when I was a trooper that I still carry, on a permit. And I have 2 rifles, and that's it. One was my father's. It was a family thing. But, and again, and that's totally fine. It's just not, but the importance of understanding the safety of it. And I learned a lot of that from Kevin,
Yeah.
And that was something, obviously you learn it in you go to basic training, they teach you how to shoot the 22 caliber AR-15 and all that. But, it's a very esoteric level of understanding how it works, and understanding firearm safety. And obviously as a kid growing up, I hunted. My brother Chuck and I, we were expected to hunt with my grandfather. My grandfather was a big hunter and loved deer hunting. And my brother-in-law, Tim, my sister Charlene's husband, Tim, he, they would all hunt together. And then I was, again, I'm younger than them, a lot younger. So as I grew up, I started, I would go hunting with them. I'd go deer hunting. I'd go small game hunting and all of that. But after my grandfather died, I never hunted anymore because it just wasn't the same for me,
Mm-hmm.
And then being away, usually, when I was away on active duty, I'd come home, deer season was already over when I'd come home in December. A lot of guys would take November off, to hunt. I don't remember what the hunting season was in Nebraska, but a lot of guys would take time off during deer season to either come back to their home states and hunt. Like I know Tom is from Western Pennsylvania originally, and he, guys would take that time off. And for me, it was different. It wasn't the same anymore. So I don't hunt anymore. I just don't.
Right.
So
yeah, Tom loved the hunting, deer hunting. He really took to the Nebraska.
Yeah. Well, I remember
environment there, and
I remember him and Joe Vest, and I'm friends with Joe. I'm friends with Joe. I'm friends with Joe on Facebook. Joe, hope you're doing well, bro. I actually ran into Joe, ironically, in let me get my dates right, 2016. I was in Las Vegas for the first time.
That's where I saw him. I think it was.
I was in Las Vegas. My first time, just went to visit for a week, see what it's all about. Not a big gambler, but just went, see what it's all about, And ironically, I look at Facebook while I'm there, and Joe and his wife are in Las Vegas. And I'm like, holy crap. So I sent him a Facebook message. I'm like, hey, dude, I'm in Las Vegas. And he's like, holy shit, let's get together. We got together and had lunch, had pictures. We hadn't seen each other since the 80s. And I ran it, and I still in touch with him.
Yeah, I think I met up with him in Reno during one of the SAFE conventions, SAFE, after he'd gotten out. But I've got just one quick Joe Vest story. We used to play at the Offutt Air Force Base, in the shop there. We'd play pranks, and a lot of it was those little firecrackers with the 2 little strings. And so if you're working the night shift for the flight line, we would booby trap this and booby trap that, and he'd always get me real good, And then I crawled out. He'd have this 60s some pickup or something that he had, and he lived down in Plattsmouth South.
Yep.
And I tied one underneath to his brake pedal. Well, the beauty of it is it slid down a little bit and it loosened up. So just a little bit that he had to push his brakes to get off base, it never went off. But then he's heading south on the highway, and then he goes turning left into Plattsmouth, and he had to push that brake harder, and bam, it went off right there. He didn't expect anything away from the shop, So
That's awesome.
yeah, so it's fun reconnecting with him years later too.
I went to Hawaii with him. I actually got pictures, and we went to Hawaii, and actually the day the space shuttle blew up, in January of '86,
wow.
we had left Offutt in the morning, and we didn't know what happened until we didn't know about it. We flew on a tanker over there. Chief White hooked us up with some kind of something just to go, and we land and we're driving, we're going to the building and we see all these headlights on. We're like, why are all the headlights on? They're like, oh, one of the space shuttle. I'm like, what about the space shuttle? Well, the space shuttle blew up. What? We had no idea. And then actually one of the astronauts was from Hawaii, one of the military, Lieutenant Colonel, I forget his last name, but yeah, and that was the day. So we left Nebraska before they launched. So we were in the air going the opposite direction, of course. Didn't hear anything about it. And then I remember we left Nebraska that morning. It was like -20. And when we landed in Honolulu, it was like 80 degrees. And it was like, that 100-degree temperature change. It was awesome. but yeah, Joe and I went together. And like I said, just hadn't caught, another guy just hadn't caught up with. But I remember Joe and I remember Tom Boyer. And I thought there was a couple of other guys that they were big into hunting in Nebraska. And that's great. That's their thing. That's cool. Like I said, but the kind of close that comment was just with the Kevin was the one who was really, really just at a young age was just like, know your weapon, understand it. Don't, and just really learn things from him about firearm safety that up to that point, he had the basics, but never really that next level stuff. And to see what he does is pretty cool. And, carried that into my state police career. So we, it's a big part. I know we kind of spent a lot of time on this. It's a big part of my life was those guys. I don't know if those guys will ever really understand how important they are to me. And just how much that time in my life was so formidable as to who I am now. Just reflect on a lot of memories. I was telling one of the kids next door, I say kid, he's in his mid-20s now, but he came over the other day. I was out working behind my shed. I'm just kind of rearranged some of my property back there to make a shelter for my truck, my toy you saw out in the driveway, my 1966 Ford F100. I love that thing. But we were talking and I asked, how you doing? I catch up with them. And I said, I couldn't remember him or his brother. One of them is a relatively new father. And I was telling him the story. He goes, and he said, oh no, that's my brother. I don't have any kids yet. How old are you? And he goes, I'm 24. I go, oh, you got time. And he goes, yeah, my girlfriend's a couple years younger than me. So, we're not in any rush. And he's the younger of the two boys next door, and I say next door, they're adults now. But anyway, so I remember I said, so I got to tell you, I tell you the story. And this is a true story. It's something Chief White told us early on. I'll try to clean it up a little bit. But essentially what he told us was, he said, listen, and again, you got to keep the context of this. It was back in the 80s, right? So back then, I don't think there was really any expectation of parents to send their kids to college. And I think there's an expectation now that you will take care of your kids when they graduate from high school and put them through college or assist them, right? Back then there wasn't, right?
Not at all.
You're out of high school, you're on your own, right? And so, but Chief White had made a comment about having kids, and essentially what he said was, I'll just say it. So he says, so between now and the time you're 25, he goes, fuck everything you can. Just don't get her pregnant, right? You're too young to have kids. Have your kids between the time you're 25 and 35, and then stop. Because there's going to come a day when you're going to want to retire and just enjoy that next chapter of your life, and you don't want to be raising kids at that phase of your life. And so, again, I laughed at the time, like we all did, and just sitting around having a beer, that kind of thing after work. And I kind of chuckled at it. I remember at the time he made that comment, but it makes perfect sense. If you think about it, right? It's great, kind of in his own colorful way, a great way to kind of tell you, hey,
Get
this is
through
how
to
you
the young guys.
This is how you should structure your life, right?
Yeah.
And actually, as the way my life turned out, I had my oldest daughter, Sarah, when I was 26. I just turned 26, like a couple months before she was born. And my son, Jack, who's my youngest, I would have been 33. Yeah, I'd have been 33 when he was born. I was almost 34. So I kind of nailed it. So, kudos to Chief White for the advice, but yeah, I have 4 wonderful children, and Sarah's 32, right? My math correct on that, Sarah? No, you're 31. You'll be 32 in January. Rachel is 26, right? 26. Yeah, she'll be 27 next month. She's married. Her husband, Anthony, is a wonderful young man. Then my daughter, Rebecca, is, got to do the math in my head again. She's 24, graduated recently from Duke University's nursing school, and she's a nurse down in North Carolina. And my son, Jack, is 23, and he's a senior at Old Dominion, and will eventually have his PhD in physics and math, and they're doing great, and I'm crazy proud of all of them. I love them dearly. Love to hear from you a little bit more, but at the same time, I keep perspective because I understand what it's like to be a young adult and forging your way in life. And Sarah and Rachel live locally. Jack and Rebecca live out of state, but they're Sarah's doing some great work for a small law firm here in town, and Rachel runs her own business. She's got a business where she takes care of animals, and she like she said, I'm turning business away because I'm so busy right now, and she's got such a great following. So they're awesome. They're doing great, and I'm crazy proud of you guys. I love you dearly, and I hope to see you over the holidays or talk to you soon. But yeah, that was kind of his whole, hey, this is how you should have your kids, and
With a little wild turkey next to him.
Yes,
to give you the advice.
Yes, that or Thunderbird.
Thunderbird. That's what it was.
Yeah.
I knew. I knew there was one.
So you were there when he PCS'd, right, to the Philippines. Were you there?
It was right close there, but I went out Palace Chase to Sioux City, Iowa. So I was really only there 2.5 years.
Yeah,
right in there.
I forget what year. I should know this, and I forget. I think it was 86. He might have left. 86. It was definitely 86, 87.
A little before
he transferred. Leaving. He transferred to, he got promoted, and he transferred to, became the shop superintendent for the 3rd fighter wing down in the Philippines. And then I know eventually he had come back to the Pentagon. But he, at his going away party at Kevin's house, he had brought a case of Thunderbird. Okay. That was his thing, And so he gave every one of us a bottle, and you had to drink that whole bottle.
Oh, my word.
Oh, Lord. Oh, it was ugly, but it was a great time. It was I've got pictures. I have to show them to you. I got pictures of us at the party. Just insane. It was just, I don't know where these pictures came from. I don't know how I got them, but I got pictures and they're, but yeah, he loved his Thunderbird, and I don't know how he drank that. It was awful. It was absolutely awful, but hey, Chief, Yeah,
he's a great guy.
Good.
Everybody loved him.
Again, another guy, when you look at your life, you think who are the people, in your life, and notwithstanding the comment I made about, there people come into your life for a reason, but certain people stay with you, that leave that indelible mark on you. And for me at a very young age, it was definitely Chief White, and Kevin, Bruce Orman. I mean, these guys, they forced me to be great. I mean, you think about the standards that were in that shop, I mean, I look at that, I look back at, just your boots, just simple things like your uniform always had to be ironed.
And the fatigues we had at that time.
Yeah.
Crease.
Yeah. The greens. I mean, this is pre-cami. This is pre BDUs, as we call them. I mean, this was the greens, and your boots. Not only we would have a competition with some of us that lived in the dorms, and I know when you came on base, you didn't live in the dorms because you were married, but we'd have a competition like who wore it better, kind of thing. Like, not only were our uniforms like razor sharp creases in our uniforms, but our boots, not only were they shined, but we would ladder lace our boots. Military guys, you should know what that is. Maybe you don't. I don't know. Look it up. But we would ladder lace our boots, right? And we'd get jungle boots. Like, we'd go to I remember there's an Army Navy store downtown Omaha by the Civic Center. And I went and bought like Vietnam era jungle boots because I had to be just a little bit better than everybody else, right? And they would be like to a high gloss shine with ladder lace, ladder lacing on them. And it was, but it was just like that standard that we had set, it was, some guys did it, some guys didn't. And again, you get back to the comment about everybody got along, and they did. It was just like, for some guys, it was like, that's the young guys in particular. That was, that was kind of our thing, but these guys, they pushed you. I mean, they really pushed you to be great. They pushed you to be excellent at your job, to have that professionalism. And for me, it was what I needed. It was, I made that comment a while ago about, I know I had to go in the military to grow up. Well, that made me grow up, that pursuit of excellence. But they were there to get you drunk. They were there to sober you up. They were there to kick you in the ass if you just were not doing what you should be doing. They all were. But there's, and everybody, Eric Downing's another one. I mean, I went to TDY to England with him, and he's another one who, I look at like, man, the guy had his shit together, I'm friends with him on Facebook. Eric, I hope you're doing well, brother. But there was a lot of people in their own way. My very first supervisor when I was in the shop was Dan Bray. I don't know if you remember Dan or not.
Yeah, he was my first one too, because they sent me right to
chem defense
section.
Yeah, he was doing the chem section. Then he left, and he went to do that super secret squirrel mission out in the deserts of Nevada that we all know now what it was all about. And he had called me one night and asked me to come work for him out there. And I just, too young, too stupid, maybe too ignorant to know what was going on. Obviously couldn't tell me on the phone.
Right.
But
just that it was really cool.
But to find out it was, later on, it was really cool. And but even him, just, in their own way, but, and that's not, not to take away from every supervisor I had in the shop. I had great supervisors, working for Bob Lathrop in training. I mean, the guy was just a plethora of knowledge when it comes to understanding not only just his craft of survival, but also understanding how public speaking. I mean, a lot of my public speaking skills I learned from Bob Lathrop early on as a 19-year-old kid, getting up and talking to people. And I told
full-bird colonels in your class.
I've told people that story about, I've told people that story about, here I am 19 years old, and I'm trying to teach survival training to guys who got shot at in Vietnam. I mean, you got guys that are now they were young lieutenants and captains back then flying linebacker missions over Hanoi. And now they've progressed to become lieutenant colonels and in some cases generals. And here I am as this 19-year-old kid trying to teach them air crew survival. And even I realized this is fucked up, but they were cool about it. They were, very just, they understood.
They're respectful.
They were very respectful. They understood I had a job to do. They obviously understood I was learning a job. But Bob was, in his own way, was very good about teaching you how to talk to people, how to, what I say, work a room, understanding, kind of looking at people as you're talking to them to kind of make that contact with them. And I learned that from him. I watched him just sitting in the classroom and watching him, just watch him, how he, you pick up on things. And that definitely helped me later in life as an instructor. I've been a police instructor for years. I'm still teaching in my retirement. I'm still teaching emergency management courses for New York State. And obviously it helped me just talk to people in my law enforcement career. And the things I learned there, my active duty assignment, that I brought to the Guard, it gave me such a leg up on who Dave Kolb would have been without it, and, but those guys, they did. I mean, there's a handful of people. I think about them quite often and how much they have, what they've done for me. And then, and again, they were just, and every one of them, I'm sure, true gentlemen to their core, they would humbly say, "Oh, I was just doing my job." You were, but you invested time in me. You invested time in who I am now. You all need to take a little credit for that. And look, and I don't mean this to sound pretentious or arrogant, but I've had a very successful professional life, very successful life. And I'm very blessed. I've been, hard work, right place at the right time, great mentors. One of my former commanders in the Guard, who went on to retire as the 2-star general here in New York State, as the state adjutant general, his name's Tony German. When in his going away email to his troops, and I'll kind of paraphrase what he said, but basically what he said was, the reason you're successful in life is because of the people around you. So be generous with your time, your talents, and your accolades for others. And, I never forgot that. Here's a guy, as I left Nebraska in March of '88, and I transitioned to the New York Air National Guard in the Raven Gang, my second family, or third family, I should say, my real family, my active duty family, now my Guard family. He was a captain on active duty who transferred to the Guard, and we in process together the same drill weekend. So here we are. It's now the May drill weekend of 1988, and you've got to go to meet the commander, right? You got to have the wing commanders in processing briefing. And Colonel, I think it's Doug Morey, was the wing commander at the time. And so, of course, he's doing his thing, and he's talking to us. And he's telling us who he is and where he came from, and he's doing this and he's doing that. And Tony and I happened to be sitting in the back of the room together. And he just leans over to me and he goes, "What's your name?" And, here I am. I got an 06 standing in front of me, and I got this captain. I'm like, "Dave Kolb." And he goes, "What do you do here on base?" I go, "I'm life support." He goes, "Oh, cool." Yeah, he's in flight suits. So I knew he was aircrew. And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh, cool. You'll be working on my helmet." And I go, "Yeah, probably." So we just got talking, right? And actually, at one point, we kind of got caught.
I was going to say, because you just came from a training background.
And so, Colonel Morey, I think, if, God bless him, I don't know if he actually said anything, but he just kind of looked at us like, "Hey, you two in the back, knock it off," kind of thing, right? So we got talking, and we've been friends ever since. We've been friends ever since. And again, I took my experiences active duty and I brought him to the Guard. And again, as luck would have it, I had another group of people in my now Guard family who were there to mentor me and just push me to be excellent, to be great. And it really, first and foremost, it starts with Jerry Stoddard. I mean, he is, if I had to put 3 people on the medal stand as my mentors, he's on the medal stand. I don't 1, 2, or 3. You guys can fight over it, but he truly was. And I mean, he saw something in me that he invested his time in me, and that meant so much to me with just everything. And it wasn't just being a good life support technician. It was being a good person. It was being a good airman. it was being a good state trooper. And, cause it was at that time, I had taken the entrance exam for the state police in the fall of 88. When I came back, they weren't given the exam until the fall of 88. So, Jerry, again, being a good person, I got a lot of active duty order through the summer. And I had civilian jobs that I was working. But Jerry gave me a lot of active duty time, was actually trying to get a technician position open for me. He's like, look, I'm not dumping on your dream at all. He goes, look, I know what it's like to live with this. My dad was a state trooper. He's now the sheriff in Schoharie County. Look, he goes, I want you to pursue your dream. But if it doesn't work out, I want to try to get you here full time as a technician. And so I was great. I mean, again, somebody has supported me, supported my dream, pushed me, and all of that. And then, took the exam in September of 88. And of course, New York State, being New York State, they go into a hiring freeze, right? Just always seems like there's a Cuomo as governor, there's a hiring freeze, right? So they didn't hire, they had a class in, I didn't get, they were picking off the old list, my list. I didn't get into the State Police Academy until 1992, just the way it worked out. But in the interim, again, Jerry knew I really wanted to be in law enforcement. I wanted to be a police officer. And again, at the time he understood, understood kind of the way things were in New York at the time when it came to getting hired and stuff like that. So he's like, look, my dad's looking for people at the sheriff's office. Is this something you think you'd be interested in? I'm like, I don't know. So I went out, I interviewed for the sheriff's department, and wasn't the first one hired. And again, they didn't have a road patrol back then. It's kind of weird. Every state's different. So, take this and keep in perspective. But New York State, the sheriff's departments aren't mandated to have a road patrol. Okay. They're mandated to take care of the jail. That's their job under state law, the civil department. That there's certain things that they're mandated to do. The road patrol is not one of them. So sheriff's departments, if they have a road patrol, it's because they're financially able to have it through their county budget. At the time, the Schoharie County Sheriff's Office didn't have a full-time road patrol. Their civil deputies would do, serve civil summonses, paperwork like that, and then they would do traffic if they were, something happened or they would be available, things like that. But so really, primarily, it was go work in the jail. And so, so I figured, okay, let's do this. So let's try it. I went and I interviewed, and I wasn't the first one they hired, but I was, I think maybe the second one that they hired, and I was working part-time. But it was kind of like, I felt like a foot in the door kind of thing, and then eventually, that was the spring of 91. And then in the fall of 91, I went to part-time police academy to get my New York State certification as a police officer. So at the time, I'm in the Guard, and I'm still working a lot of hours. I'm still doing pulling a lot of guard time, or guard bumming, as we like to call it, right? I'm still pulling a lot of guard bumming time at the Guard. And, that was when, again, I a lot of deployments, went to Panama with the Guard, with the unit, went to Greenland. I was in the first Arctic Survival School, Barren Land Arctic Survival School course that was certified by the Air Force, because we had IELTS instructors come and teach it, and that was in the spring of 91. Got activated a couple times during the Gulf War, kind of thing, for that. But we, did a couple deployments in support of Operation Desert Storm. So Jerry was very good at, pushing you to kind of think bigger picture, start, really first one to kind of push me in the supervisor role. You go back to Offutt, first term airman, was a senior airman when I left. Really, you weren't so much supervising people.
Right.
You're really trying to just not fuck shit up yourself.
Yeah, you got to
know?
be the worker bee for a while.
Right. You're trying to be a good 5 level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Air Force guys will understand that. That was really what it was. You're just trying to be a good 5 level. And, as a first term airman, but then I transitioned to the Guard. And when I left the active duty, I was a senior airman. So back then you had you had E4 senior airman, then E4 buck sergeant.
Buck sergeants.
And
right.
then, so when I went to the Guard, I went into on the Manning document, I went into an E5 position, went into a staff sergeant slot. And so I came in as a senior airman, and then what was it? You had to be I forget how many months it was, or you had to be, or maybe it was a year. You had to be a senior airman for 6 months before you could become a sergeant, or 12 months, whatever it was back then. I fulfilled that. And then I pinned on sergeant. And then, cause I think I did. And then actually, I think I made sergeant that summer. Like I got there in the spring of 88, and I think I put on sergeant in the summer of 88. Cause my promotion dates were always August 16th. Cause that's the day I went in the air on active duty.
Right.
Right. So I think that's what it was. I think cause I had pinned on E4 senior airman in like August of 87. So I made E4 sergeant in August of 88. And then, as you know, with the Guard, time of grade, time of service, you can put on E5, so I made E5 in the summer of 89.
Yeah, because they were changing the Manning document ranks at that time, where the lowest enlisted rank was staff sergeant, and the lowest officer rank, I think, was major. It was lower than that. Right about the time.
Yeah, when I came into the 109th on the Manning document, there was 2 guys that we call Guard babies. They had no active duty time. They came right into the Guard from civilian status. So they were in the E4 slots. I got put in the E5 slot because Jerry knew I was promotable within 12 months of getting there. So that's why I was in the E5 slot. And then eventually they changed them and everything became an E5. So it wasn't like I was holding up somebody from a promotion, but I had time on these guys, and I also had my 5 level. They didn't, that kind of thing. And so once I became an E5, that was when Jerry was like, you could just see, it was like now, his position towards me changed in the sense of, now you're supervising people, you're a supervisor. And then it kind of synonymously at the time, that's when our shop started to grow, because we started picking up the Antarctica mission, as things kind of got, they got a couple more Guard slots. So you got some more guys in the shop. And his expectation was that you're going to supervise these guys. Not that they didn't want to, the E8, who was the superintendent at the time, Jerry was the E7, and there was an E6. Not that they were they didn't want to do the position, but on the drill weekends, they had their job. The E8 was Jim Matulowicz, may he rest in peace. He was the shop superintendent, so he was dealing with the wing level stuff. Jerry was the NCOIC of the shop, and then the E6 was Paul Turpening, who retired a chief. They had their jobs to do, and then obviously the worker bees, we had our jobs to do. But it was like, Jerry was like, now you're a supervisor now, and things like that. And I'll never, one of the first things, again, you talk about sometimes you learn from your mistakes. I was deployed. We were doing an ORE, and we weren't far. We were just over in Westover. And for those of you not familiar, Westover it's actually, we used to be an active duty Air Force base. It was a B-52 base, if I recall. Now it's a reserve base, and I think they fly C-17s, or they had C-5s over there. I think they're C-17s. Mm-hmm. They got the really big, they got a couple of big runways. So, and it's in Chicopee, Mass, which from here is hour and 10-minute drive. So it's not that far. But we would deploy, we'd go over there, and we'd fly over there, and we'd have our operation readiness exercises, or our OREs, to get ready for our ORIs, or our operational readiness inspections. And one time we went over, one ORE we went over, and Jerry sent me over as the NCOIC. So I'm like the senior ranking guy to run the shop. And I remember saying at the time, like, well, why aren't you guys going? He goes, it's time for you to do it. He goes, it's time for you to do this. And he goes, you know what you got to do. Just do what you got to do. Talk to the squadron commander or the XO if you got problems, things like that. He goes, you've already deployed. You've been to Panama. You've already deployed a couple times already. during Desert Storm, you know what you need to do. Just do it. Make sure your guys are doing their job. Okay. So the weekend or however many days, 4 or 5 days went along, things were fine. We could time for redeployment. You know, the chalk lists come out, and now I'm on this chalk, and again, kind of a rookie mistake. Well, it was time for me to go. I jumped on the fucking chalk and I left. Came back to the shop. I walk in the shop. Hey, what's going on? He goes, what are you doing here? I'm like, we just landed. He goes, I know. Why are you here? I'm like, I don't know. He goes, do you still have people in the shop out there? I'm like, yeah. Why? I'm like, well, it's not their chalk hasn't. He goes, that's not the point. And the point he was trying to make was you need to be the last one out.
Last one out.
And I'm like, well, and that's when he sat me down, he talked to me about it. He goes, look, you're a supervisor now. You got to look at things differently. It's not about you anymore. It's about your people. And man, that hit me like a slap in the face.
When you thought you were just like following orders or whatever, the logistics had your name there, obviously for a reason, you thought. And
exactly. And so, but it was like a slap in the face, but it wasn't like, he wasn't being mean. It was a teachable moment, you know?
Right.
And so and like he said this to me, he goes, you got to understand you're a supervisor now. It's not about you. I had my 7 level. It's not about you now. It's about your people. It's not about you anymore. And I felt awful. I remember I left the shop. I felt like I did something wrong, which I did. And I felt like I let him down, which I don't know if I did, but I feel like I did, you know. I feel like he really put a lot of faith in me to learn. And yeah, sometimes you learn by making mistakes. And now I'm stressing out all day, waiting for the last chalk to get back, and to make sure that there was no problems with the shop and things like that, and what have you. And I realized, I felt awful. I'm like, I should have stayed. I never thought of it, but I never thought about it. Not that that's an excuse, but that was, again, that was the teachable moment for me. I learned that that's what you do. You be the last one to leave. If you're in charge, you make sure that everything is set before you, it's not about you. It's about your people.
Well, and you didn't go home. You stayed there to receive them at least.
I did, but I think out of guilt more than anything.
Well,
just to make sure I was, I don't know if it was self-serving on my part. Maybe it was like, just make sure there's nothing bad happened, what have you. But it was all good, and again, no harm, no foul, but
Right.
it was, but again, I was wrong, and I realized I was wrong, and he didn't. But the cool thing about Jerry Stoddard, and you know him, so you know who he is, his vibe is that he's always about, he's never, not a malicious person. It's not about making you feel bad. It's about you just understanding that, hey, this is really what you should do in the future, and this is what will make you a better supervisor and make you a better person. And that was what I truly realized. And that was just one of many, many opportunities I had to learn from him. But it was Jerry Stoddard who was the one. Now I'll go to 1997. Okay, so now I'm a tech sergeant in the summer of 97. I don't know how I remember this shit, but I did. Okay, so of course now, because the shop superintendent had retired, and so of course everybody moved up. Jerry Stoddard moved up to be the E8 in the shop as a superintendent. Paul Turpening moved up to be the NCOIC E7. So I was the natural choice to become the E6. So I move up. I'm now the E6. And, again, more responsibility. But the squadron at the time wanted to, was making a change with the first sergeant position. So I get a call one day, this is, like I said, this is 97. So I've been a trooper for, 4 or 5 years at this point. And I get a phone call. I was working nights. I remember Jerry woke me up when he called me, and he's like, "Hey, you free? You free for a minute?" I go, "Yeah, what's up?" "I wake you up?" No. He goes, "You're working nights, aren't you?" I'm like, "Yeah, but don't worry about it." And he's like, "Hey, would you be interested in being the first sergeant of the squadron?" And I'm like, "Yeah. I mean, yeah, first sergeants, they're badass. Yeah, sure." And I'm like, "Well, what's going on?" He goes, "You get a chance, stop by the shop." He goes, "I'll put you on orders for a day. Come up. I got some, we got some work to do." And he goes, "And we'll sit down and we'll talk about it." So he filled me in on what was going on. and what have you. And so they were going to do interviews, and they interviewed, but I wasn't promotable yet. I'd only been the first sergeant this was, I think maybe it was more late 97, early 98 when it happened, but I'd only been a tech sergeant for less than a year, maybe not even a year. So I forget what the time and grade was to go from tech to master. It might have been 2 years.
I'm guessing 2 years.
I think it was 2 years. So I was not promotable yet. So the squadron commander at the time, Lieutenant Colonel Russ Offutt, Russ always got his way, and he wanted me to be the first sergeant. So they basically left the current first sergeant, and he was a full-time technician out there at the base. And he and I are good friends, and I learned a lot from him. He transferred on the guard side. He might have even stayed in the first sergeant billet, but he was, like I say, he was a full-timer out there. And I stayed on paper in life support, but I was acting first sergeant for, I don't know, months. And then I pinned on master sergeant in 99, and then went to the first sergeant's academy in 2000. But, again, that was a lot of that had to do with, it was was obviously my ability and kind of what I brought to the table at that point to do the interview and what have you. But a lot of it dealt with was Jerry Stoddard. And, he's the one that pushed me to just be better, to not settle for where you're at now, be better, always be better. And, again, and I know I keep saying this, but it's important. He invested his time in me. Mm-hmm. And I've told people this, and I never heard it from anybody, but it's something that I firmly believe in, is that the greatest gift that you can give another person is your time. The greatest gift that you own as a person is your time. Again, to give yourself to someone else, to give your time. Time is valuable. Time is precious. We only all have so much of it. And for you to invest your time in something or someone is very, very important. I do a lot of volunteer work because it's important to me to invest my time in something that I think is for a greater good. Mm-hmm. And Jerry, again, along with all the folks I talked about, Jerry invested his time in me. And again, a lot of guys at the guard base did. Paul Turpinning did. We did a lot of survival work together. Deployed to, we went to Wild Stallion when a lot of people didn't even know what Wild Stallion was. I went for a couple years in the 80s. When I first came to the Guard, I did a couple years in Wild Stallion, once as an instructor or as a student. And then I think I went back as like an assistant instructor and then I went to another one, and Century Storm was another one that I did down in Virginia, down at Martinsburg, West Virginia, at the Guard unit down there.
Right.
And then I did one that they sent me to called Ridge Runner. I don't know if you ever heard of that one.
Yeah, I've heard of that one.
That was a very difficult course to get into. They only allowed 60 students in that. They only allowed 2 people from the Air National Guard to be in that course. Mm-hmm. And that was Navy SEALs, Army Special Forces, Army Rangers, Marine Force Recon guys, Air Force Pararescue, and me. So, you talk about a high speed. This was a high speed survival exercise. You were teamed up. That was the year. You remember the movie Bat 21 with Gene Hackman and Danny Glover?
I haven't seen it, but
it was about Lieutenant Colonel Iceal Hambleton. He was shot down in 1972 as an EWO and an EB-66, and he was shot down. And but he was one of the guys that had all the secrets from the SAC days, and they really wanted him back. And they went on that. It's now declassified, but the rescue mission to get him back. And he was actually picked up. I think it was Lieutenant Tom Norris was a Navy SEAL, was actually the one who came up and picked him up Actually, I think it was Lieutenant Norris was awarded the Medal of Honor for that rescue mission. You can again research it. It's a fascinating story. Read the book, see the movie. But the book was fascinating. Well, Colonel Hamilton was one of our guest speakers, and then Colonel Roger Lowshirt, if I'm saying his name correctly, I might be mispronouncing it, was an F4 driver, was shot down. He evaded for like 60 days, I think it was,
Wow.
and he evaded back into South Vietnam and returned to friendly forces. I might be saying his name wrong. I might even have but it was significant. It was well over a month that this guy escaped and evaded from. And these guys were our guest speakers. So it was a very high speed.
Big deal.
And for Jerry to pull it off to get me to get into this exercise was absolutely fascinating. And we, so you get paired up with somebody and to do the E&E portion of this exercise, so you obviously got the classroom instruction, then you got the practical exercise. And this was back when they put you in the net. Remember the net of the old Cold War era days, the pre 9/11 different terrorism we're dealing with now, the E&E nets that when we were all guests of the People's Democratic Republic, remember that? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they were still running that type of scenario, and so I get paired up with this guy. His name is Lance. I forget his last name. He was an Army Ranger. And we got dropped off. It's pouring rain. We have to, they give us our course. We're basically heading on almost like a northwesterly heading, northwest. I forget how many clicks it was. It was close to 14, I think was our total from where we dropped off to where we had to get to. Okay. And we had X amount of days to get there without getting caught.
Mm-hmm.
So our pregame, everybody gets a pregame, and they actually inspected your equipment. You were not allowed to bring anything other than what was on your aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, I was a C-130 guy, so I was able to bring a survival vest, and I was able to kind of make a poncho, tie it off, so I could pack shit in my poncho and able to go. But so Lance, our pregame, Lance says, okay, listen, see that east-west hardball road about 6.5 clicks from here? Yeah, we're going to cross that before sunrise.
Oh, man.
And everybody had a team number, so your teams 1 through 30, and we had to carry a lanyard. And then once you crossed that road, you had to tie that lanyard to a tree on the north side of that road. That was the rules that the cadre had set up without getting caught. So we get dropped off. It's pouring rain. We start heading out, map and compass, your typical old school shit, right? So we head out. Now I thought I was in good shape. No, I was in awful shape compared to this guy.
Right.
I had, and to his credit, we were a team. He never left me behind, but we got to where we were going. We got across that hardball road at probably about 3:30 in the morning. I think they dropped us off right after dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't get caught. Come to find out, and then we get across the road. You got the lanyard? Yeah, tie it on that tree. Tie it on the tree about 6 feet up. We move up to the top of the hill. He goes, we got to get out of this fucking rain. And I'm like, at this point, I'm like, does it matter? We're soaked. We are soaked. Well, come to find out, it was Hurricane Hugo coming up the coast.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we're in the mountains of West Virginia while Hurricane Hugo is coming up the coast. There's nowhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
So you just hunker down. So we get to the top of the hill. We get across the road, get up the hill. I don't know, probably half a mile north of the road. He goes, all right, let's just hunker down here. We got good visibility, good security up here. Let's just hunker down and give ourselves like 2 hours, Okay. So I'm like, what are you going to set up for a shelter? He goes, I don't know. So I just said, well, I took my trenching tool. I put myself, I found a big pine tree. There was no thunder or lightning. It was just rain, rain. So I get on the downward side of the tree and I take an E-tool and I just dig a trench around me. And I just get in my poncho. I snap it up. And water's just running around. It goes hitting the tree, going around the tree and going down around me. And I'm laying there. And my last thought before I fall asleep was well, if I die, I'm already in a body bag. I was so exhausted, Jim. I was exhausted. And I was just like, if I die, I'm not going to feel it because I'm just so tired right now.
Yeah.
The next morning, we weren't caught. Get to where we got to go, get picked up by the net, get run through the net, get brought back. Camp Dawson, West Virginia is an Army Special Forces camp, and that's where this was being held. So they had an Army field artillery battalion doing some maneuvers and exercises there. So they're blowing off whatever 105 millimeter howitzers, whatever the hell those guys had. It was loud as shit. We're coming back through. So they're running us through. Oh, we're coming through. We're blindfolded. We have no idea where we are.
Right.
We're getting you guys across the enemy lines to get you back home. And we get through, and they whip our blindfolds off, and we're standing there in front of the cadre.
Mm-hmm.
Come to find out, we were the first team to cross that road by 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
We were 3 hours ahead of the second place team, something like that, 3-4 hours. We were the first team to get picked up into the net. We were the first team to get through the net. It was insane. It was absolutely insane. What a phenomenal experience that I probably never would have had the opportunity to go through. But again, just, Jerry believing in me. I mean, again, there was 2 slots for the entire Air National Guard.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know who the other guy was.
Yeah.
But to have that, I said, Jerry, I'd like to do this. And he's like, oh man. He goes, you sure? He goes, you sure? He goes, this is a big deal. He goes, this is a big deal. He goes, if you really think you can do this, I'll put you through it. And he did, and because he believed in me. And, that was just something that stuck with me, and again, he pushed me to be the first sergeant. And, it was a lot of that opportunity just has stuck with me for the rest of my life. And it's made me just kind of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, truly helped with my state police career. And again, these are things you can never repay people for that time that they invest in you. You can only hope that you do the right thing to pay them back,
Right.
So,
cool.
Yeah.
Well, hey, are you ready for a little break?
Yeah, I think we should.
Yeah, so I think we're at a good transition point to get
Mm-hmm.
more. Then we're going to move
Mm-hmm.
into the state,
Yeah.
the state police, the
Sure.
whole bit, which is there's quite a bit there to
God,
unwrap
bro,
as well. So
that's another.
Yeah.
I just looked. We're at 2 hours. I'm just like, oh my God, we're
we didn't really get started
not quite,
till that said
buck 50
6.
maybe, 145. But yeah, I'm like, holy crap, where the hell did the time go?
Well, and if we have enough, like I told you before we started, there's no time limit, and we just might even put this in a 2-parter. So
Whatever you want to do.
You've got a lot to unwrap
I do.
yet.
Yeah, I do. I'm not even. I haven't even scratched the surface.
Well, we just took a little break.
Yeah.
And we've covered the early life, the Offutt. That was great talking about all that stuff. Getting into the Guard, Ridge Runner. Yeah, I didn't know you got to go on that though.
I did. Ridge Runner 89. Yeah, definitely. They actually, one of the guys, he was a pararescue instructor. They actually put him in the county jail as part of the net. He showed up in his yellow prison jail jumpsuit. They actually broke him out of jail.
Mm-hmm.
It was just the whole county down there in wherever Camp Dawson, West Virginia is. I know it's kind of over on the western side of the state, but that whole community was involved in that. That was something that wasn't just the Army Guard putting that on. That was the whole community was involved in it. I mean, they had volunteers. When I was in the net, part of my way of fitting in as a local was I was on a farm milking cows.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. I had to learn how to milk a cow. And
all
they
out.
actually, one of the pickup points was in the cemetery. They dropped me off in a cemetery and left me there for 2 hours. And then some young woman picked me up and drove me to a house that was empty. It was obviously like a cabin that, I'm sure the owners were in on it and allowing us to use it. And I was left there for a day or two by myself with no communication. There was food, you could shower. The shower was great. After all that, to be able to shower, I think I showered for like almost an hour. It felt like.
Oh, I believe it.
but it was, there was food and everything in there for you to. But what they wanted me to experience, and they explained it later on when they debriefed us, was the isolation of being, just nobody, not communicating with anybody, not knowing when there was, when somebody was going to come get you. There was no radio, no TV. There was some magazines and stuff probably for you to read, maybe a local newspaper.
No going outside.
But no going outside.
No,
nothing. And you see, you're talking about, here I am, 20, 22 at the time. I was 22 years old. I mean, it was awful. Just being alone like that for like 2 days, like with no communication, no nothing. And then at some point, I forget the timeline and how it worked, but I don't know if I was in the cabin first, then the farm. But I remember them moving me one to the other, or one, however it worked out. And then eventually I got repatriated back to across enemy lines, and all that. But it was, it was interesting.
Was there anybody else you knew there?
Nobody. I remember talking, again, I'm pretty easy to talk to people I don't know. And, as I get a little, get comfortable with people, you talk to them and things like that. And I remember at one point going out, and one of the Navy SEALs had his truck there, whatever the Navy gives them as a truck, and you open up the back and you just see the stuff these guys had in the back. And I'm like, how do you get all this stuff? And he just held up this plain white credit card. No Visa, no MasterCard, no nothing. Not even like a government travel card like we used to have. I mean, I've been retired a while, but nothing like that. It's just a white card. Said, I can buy anything I want on this.
Mm-hmm.
Anything. And he wasn't being arrogant about it. He was just very matter of fact. I can buy anything I want on this. And so, I mean, to see that part of it, just that type of exposure to a part of the military that I'd never seen before. Now, I'd seen some Navy SEALs down in Panama, but you didn't talk to them. You just, they were the cool kids in the back of the bus. You didn't talk to those guys, But yeah, it was pretty fascinating to be able to do that. Some phenomenal training came out of it, and just applicable to just stuff we were doing with our mission.
So how long before you retiring did you go through this? What year did you
10 years.
retire?
I retired in 2009 from the Guard. I was, I had, you figure, I don't know, with my pay date, I had 26 years at that point, 25, 26 years, depending on how it gets calculated. And I mean, I'm not collecting any retirement yet. I'm only 57, so I got a couple years left for me eligible to collect anything. But I left in 2009. Like I said, when I went in the Guard in 88, I went into life support. So I was doing all the life support stuff. We did the, back then again, Antarctica wasn't a thing straight away in 88. That was the first year that we had sent planes to Antarctica. But again, like I said previously, our mission was Greenland. That was our mission. And so guys were going to, air crew was going to Eielson for their Arctic Survival School, but it wasn't, a lot of feedback was, look, it's good, but it's not what we need. We need something more because we don't have trees in Greenland. We don't have trees in Antarctica. We need more barren land survival. So, by that point, I had already been through Fairchild. I went to Fairchild when I was at Offutt. I went to water survival school when I was at Offutt. So I didn't have the ability to, all right. So I hadn't had any Arctic survival training yet. So we're now, 88, 89, 90, we're starting to see more. We're starting to see, hey, I think they want us to do Antarctica, meaning, because at the time the Navy had the Antarctica mission, VXE-6 at a Point Mugu Naval Air Station in California. They had the mission, and they were looking to put the National Science Foundation, who was the overall manager in Antarctica, if you think of like a general contractor, right? Mm-hmm. So they were looking to put the entire Arctic mission, so Greenland, because they oversee the mission in Greenland, and Antarctica. They were looking to put under one single manager for airlift operations, and that would have been us. So, there's so that's the early 90s. We're starting to hear the noise that, hey, this may happen. So in preparation for that, again, we had some visionaries in our unit at the 109th, and some of them are way above my pay grade. These are some of the colonels that were in charge at the time, and so they're like, hey, we need better Arctic training. So it was worked out where in May, because I think the schoolhouse in Eielson is closed at the time, if I recall. And so the guys, from what I'm told, and again, I'm taking memory from a long time ago, that the Eielson instructors, some of them would just go down to Fairchild and teach for a while until the schoolhouse opened again, and they will go back up. So, and they probably still do that, but we said, okay, well, why don't we go up in May? Because that's in the middle of our Greenland season. Is, we go up there in the spring, and then they do Antarctica in the fall and the winter, because it's just, the way the Southern Hemispheres, that's their summer down there. So, so they're like, hey, we're going to run this school, this Barren Land Arctic Survival School. We're going to run this in May, I think it was April, might have been April or May, doesn't matter, of 1991. And so all the life support guys were going through it, because now we're going to be teaching it, right? And so, and again, it's still taught by the Eielson instructors. The air crew school is, because it has to be Air Force accredited. So they still come, from what I understand, I'm assuming they still come every year, and they do the school. So a bunch of them came out to the base up in Schenectady, and they did the ground school portion of it. We did all of that. And then we launched, and we flew up a bunch, we flew a bunch of aircraft up to Greenland. It's like an 8.5 hour flight on a C-130 from New York, maybe a little longer. I can't remember. It's been years since I've been up there, but we flew up there, and then the next day they flew us out to, they called it, they were called the distant early warning sites, the DEW sites, or the DIE sites. We call them DIE. So we flew out to DIE 2, which was an abandoned radar dome site. That's how they used to, the distant early warning site was where they said, okay, so if the Soviet Union is going to fire ICBMs at the United States, they're going to come over the North Pole. That's the fastest way for them to get to the United States. Hence the reason why most of the SAC missile bases are in the northern part of the United States, right? Same reason. So the distant early warning site, this basically over northern Canada and Greenland, is where the radar stations would pick up any launches. And so we would service them with our ski-equipped C-130s. So that kind of in a nutshell, that's kind of the 109th mission back then. And so, the only unit in the world with ski-equipped C-130s. At the time, the Navy also had them. Now they don't have them anymore. We have theirs. We have them. And so, so that's what they did. They set up the Arctic Survival School, the cool school, we call it. So we went up and went to Greenland and got flown out to the DIE site. And then first thing we had to do as a group was, and it was air crew members and life support were the original class of students. Some air crew, not all air crew, of course, but some air crew and life support guys. So we, first thing we did, they drop you off, they kick you out the back of the aircraft. Everybody meets at a rally point. Aircraft taxis out and takes off. So there you're all by yourself, right? So we, we set up a 20-man, inflated 20-man life raft, built a snow wall around it, put a parachute canopy over it. That was our common area, shelter, and we slept in a couple of those. I think for the first night we slept in those. And then the next day, I can't remember if we were out there 2 nights or 3 nights. I can't remember now. The next day we did fighter trenches. And so I'm paired up with a captain who's a pilot at the time. His name's John DeGraff. JD, I hope you're well, brother. And we are building these 2-man fighter trenches. So we, you got to cut down in the snow, and the snow just pops out. It's like styrofoam almost, you cut it out and you use the ice saw and cut yourself around. And we cut down until they said, okay, go down until you hit there's like a layer of ice. And so we got down almost 5.5 feet. Right. And, they're like, you can stop there. So we did. And then they tell you to take your first block and you put it up like a headstone. Looks like a headstone, right? So we're doing that, and we built our fighter trench. We got it all done, bowed it out so we could both lay next. Basically, don't make it any bigger so you guys can just lay right next to each other. Make your door 90 degrees, step down, have a cold sump. You put your. Mm-hmm. So we did all that, and it was actually not bad. It was pleasant. We took the candle, the 3-wick candles that we had in our survival sleds. And if you light one of those, and you'll get enough heat off of that to, I think maybe it gets you in the 20-degree range, but you're not going to die and you're out of the wind.
Right. And you're not going to melt your shelter.
Exactly. And that's what some guys were doing, is they were getting their shelters too warm and then it was icing over.
Right.
And when the instructors came in and checked our shelter, they're like, the temperature for this is perfect. So leave it. Don't do anything else to it. And so John and I, I think we were there, and then maybe they were there for 2 nights. And just to find a funny side story, years later, I become the first sergeant, and he's one of the 4 squadron commanders that I served with as a first sergeant. And we laughed about those days. Remember those days we slept in the fighter trench? Yeah. It was cold and all that. But yeah, so we did that. And then, as you know, that was all in preparation for us in the mid-90s. That's when they came down and said, yeah, you're taking over the Antarctica mission. The guard unit. A guard unit is taking over, an active duty mission. And
that mission is to supply the science teams that are down there?
Yeah, we're we are the airlift, the intra-continental airlift for the National Science Foundation on the continent of Antarctica under the United States Antarctica program. So, and again, and I'm going to preface this by saying a lot of things I'm positive have changed since 2009 when I retired. But my memory and my experience with the mission was, again, I told you I'd ran into Larry Hill down in New Zealand in 2002. Well, the active duty Air Force, and the reserve unit at a March, the active duty was at a McCord. They would fly missions from the United States to New Zealand. And then they were flying a rotator from New Zealand to Antarctica, but they wouldn't stay on the ice.
Right.
The only aircraft that would stay on the ice was the C-130. So if it was a 141 or a C-17, and hell, I remember one year they flew a C-5 down there to see if they could do it.
Oh, man.
But again, you have to remember the sea ice at the time on McMurdo Sound, because early in the season, they land on the ice runway in McMurdo Bay. Ice at the time was like 9 feet thick, something like that, right? So, and then in the middle of December, they shut down operations on the sea ice in McMurdo Sound, and they move, I think it's 6 or 7 miles inland to what's called Williams Field, or we call it Willie Field. Mm-hmm. And then they also have a permanent ice runway at Pegasus, and apparently now they use that full time, because I've got friends still in the unit, and they were telling me they don't use the ice runway anymore. They just use Pegasus or Willie Field. So, but when I was there, that's what they did. Beginning of the season, you land on the sea ice or you land on the ice runway. And so, but the only planes that would remain overnight were the 130s. Now, huge respect goes out to the maintenance guys. There's no hangars down there.
Right.
There's nothing. These guys are working. If they've got to change an engine, or they got to change a prop, or whatever they got to do, they got to get up in the nose cone and work on the avionics, or whatever it is they do. It's out in the open. There's no shelter.
Now, on the average, is there much wind in Antarctica?
Yeah. Depending on the season.
Plenty of wind, plenty of cold.
Right. So depending on the time of the year you're there. Now, our season would go, again, I'm assuming it's all the same. So don't throw me hate mail if it's different. Late September is when Advon would get there. And then the season would go, usually they wanted to have the first aircraft at the South Pole on or about 22nd, 23rd of October, somewhere in there, give or take a day. That's traditionally kind of the start date. Okay. Mm-hmm. When we could get, because the C-130 is 50 below. That's the weather parameter. So we would always say if it's 50 below, we're good to go, right? Now 51 below, 50 below.
Right.
Right. So, and again, have they flown outside those perimeters? Sure, they have. They had to go medevac that doctor off the ice. I think it was in '98, if my memory serves me correctly. The doctor had breast cancer. They had to get her out of there early. And that crew, phenomenal, all heroes. And the guys that support them, maintenance, all the support personnel, they got that crew down there, got them down there early, got them on the ice, got her off the ice and back to New Zealand, or back to Christchurch, or pardon me, back to McMurdo to then further medevac her out to Christchurch. Team effort, phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And so, but that was traditionally kind of when our first aircraft get on the ice. So so Advon would take 5 days to fly the aircraft from New York to New Zealand. 5 days, if I do it correctly. Day one, they'd go from Schenectady to California. They'd RON in California. Day two, they would RON in Hawaii. Day three, they would RON in Pago Pago, the American Samoa Island. And then day four, they would land in Christchurch, as long as they were on schedule. Then obviously, day five, if they went the next day, they would get to Antarctica. So I believe, again, my memory serves me correctly, that was the kind of the timeline to get the aircraft down there. So they'd fly the aircraft down. A lot of us on Advon would go commercial from Albany through Chicago to LA, pick up a night flight out of LA. We'd be in LA for like 8 hours before we'd catch a flight out of LA. We'd fly LA to Auckland, New Zealand, clear customs in Auckland, hump our bags to the domestic terminal, get on a domestic flight from Auckland, which is at the tip of the northern island, down to Christchurch, which is on the southern island on the eastern coast. And then we would stay there. And then when it was time for us to go, we would rotate down to Antarctica.
And in Antarctica, you had to bring all your own food? Is that
No. So the way it works is, if you think about it, take the general contractor and the subcontractor kind of concept. So the general contractor, we'll just say, is NSF. I'll try to really kind of water it down. So NSF, National Science Foundation, they're your general contractor. They have subcontractors. So the National Guard, specifically the 109th Airlift Wing, they're your subcontractor for airlift. So they're the ones doing all the intracontinental airlift. Yes, the Air Force and the Air Force Reserve, they're your intercontinental airlift, your strat airlift, if you will, to move men and material from the mainland to, by way of New Zealand, to Antarctica. There's a company, and at the time, I think it was Raytheon. I don't even know who it is now, but there's a company that they have a contract with NSF to do all the support services. So when you're down there at McMurdo Station, Antarctica, it's like a military base. But the military, I think, at the height of the season, only represents maybe 15% of all personnel at McMurdo Station. You're talking all this. So you have your scientists that work for NSF. They run the Crary Lab. And then you have all your support personnel that work for, and again, I think it was Raytheon, don't quote me on that, but they would be like your cooks in the galley. They would be the folks who run all the heavy equipment. They would be the ones who man the firehouse. They have a fire department down there. They would be the ones who run the shuttle buses to and from the airfield up to the MCC, or the Movement Control Center, which is like a passenger terminal for in Millspeak. And they're your subcontractor for that. And then they also subcontracted with another company, don't remember the name, that flew small aircraft and helicopters around. Like if they'd fly up to Mount Erebus, they might fly on a helicopter. They had Twin Otters down there. Again, I don't remember the name. I just remember the aircraft were red, and they would do that. And then the Coast Guard would come in at the end of the season, and the Coast Guard has 2 large icebreakers, and they would come in from the open sea, and they would cut a shipping lane from the open sea into McMurdo Sound, because there's a pier there at the where the base is, and then that was their mission for like 3 weeks. They would stay on station every day. They'd run that shipping lane to break the ice, because what that did was that brought the cargo ships in at the end of the season to offload supplies for the winter over, and then to take on all the retrograde, because nothing stayed in Antarctica. Everything was recycled. Now, I don't know if you recycle in South Dakota, but New York's big on recycling.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Nothing gets recycled like it does in Antarctica.
Right.
Like, they don't just recycle glass and plastic and paper. They recycle brown glass, green glass, clear glass, glossy paper, paper, cardboard. I mean, it's all for the right reasons, but everything gets recycled. Everything. Nothing is there. There's no septics. Everything's either repurposed or recycled. Everything.
Doing things the right way.
Exactly. And so that is done. So that's what the way the mission works. So it's all a bunch of different subcontractors. So your weather folks they're meteorologists. They work for maybe a company that's contracted with Raytheon, and they do your weather for you. That's how it works down there. It's a big community. It's just a big community. I think at the height of the season, maybe there's 1,500 people on station. And that's at just the American base at McMurdo Station. A few miles down the road, up the road, however it is geographically, is Scott Base. And that's the Kiwi base where all the New Zealanders are. Mm-hmm. And it's a very small base. You can go there certain times of the day or the week. And the rest of the time it's by invitation only, because it's very small and you must respect their space. Now, we were invited to some parties there and things like that. And you'd go over, and it's not like driving to your neighbors up the road, but that's the way it is down there. So the 109th Airlift Wing, they are the airlift people and your missions are to resupply. The main one is the South Pole Station, and that was being rebuilt at the time I was in the unit. They completely rebuilt the South Pole Station. That was in the early 2000s that they did that. And then all of the science camps, and I forget a lot of the names. I know the Russian bases in Vostok, and I forget, it's been so long, but there's all these science camps that if they can get a C-130 in, they fly them in. Some of the real small camps, they use the Twin Otter, which is just a prop plane on skis, or they use a helicopter and things like that.
Well, my youngest daughter, Deanna, you met her a couple years ago.
Yeah.
She's done either 2 or 3 trips down there.
Okay.
She just had me watch it last night. I'd never seen it before. Of course, I'd heard of it. The 1982 release of the movie that's big down there. The Thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Antarctic, Kurt Russell.
Yeah.
Antarctic Deal, and all the old style FX.
Yes.
With that thing. So yeah, we enjoyed that last night.
It's an absolute, you can say what, somebody told me this a long time ago that, basically if you get to the South Pole, I don't know the number, I forget the number now, but it's loosely like you're one of like 50,000 people in the world who's ever been to the South Pole. Mm-hmm. And I basically got within, I don't know, 700-800 miles of being at both poles, not that there's really a landmass at the North Pole, but, being up in northern Greenland, you're not too terribly far away. It's closer than it is here in New York. So, but to get to the South Pole, and I did have the opportunity to go on a few South Pole missions.
She was saying that that they had the opportunity to go to the South Pole, but they were like resupplying that area, but they don't shut the C-130 off.
No, they don't shut down
at that. So they had like 30 minutes while the
get off and do your thing.
We'd go to the South Pole, take your pictures, get back to the plane, and then the workers that were resupplying once everybody's back.
It's basically you get off the plane. It's the aircraft commander, the load master will tell you we're not shutting down. Mm-hmm. They can't shut down; it's too cold, right? And God forbid they shut down, they can't get restarted. So they don't shut down. But what they do is the air crew will either offload supplies. They always take on retro, garbage, recycling, things like that. They'll either offload fuel, like they may fly out there completely full of fuel, and then they don't need all that fuel to get back, of course. So they'll offload. They'll have a preset. Okay, we're going to offload X amount of thousands of pounds of fuel, and to refuel the storage tanks out there, or they'll and obviously personnel. We may be taking personnel out there, dropping them off. You may be grabbing personnel to bring them back to McMurdo, whatever it is. So there's many different things that'll go on at the South Pole. Some may be supply missions, some may be fuel only, some may be personnel, whatever it is that's on the mission schedule, that's the mission that gets flown. And maybe during the day, there may be 3 missions. They may have 3 lines that go out there, depending at the height of the season. And again, I'm giving you early 2000s perspective. It's, it's been a while, but, they may fly 2 lines. They may fly a morning line out and an afternoon line out. And the morning may do personnel and the afternoon may just do fuel. I don't know, whatever the mission was, but they won't. You're right. They won't. That's what the crew does. So if somebody goes out there from that perspective, that yes, you have about 30 minutes. And so they're don't screw around. We got to get out of here. So you go do your thing. You get your passport stamped at the post office, go take your pictures. If there's stuff at the store, when I was later on, when I was the first sergeant down there, if they had stuff at the store, we might take an order and say, okay, look, we're going to take an order for the store. If you want a hat or a t-shirt or something like that, from the South Pole, we'll take an order and somebody will get the money, collect the money, go out. And one person will take care of it and bring it back and disseminate it at ops.
Is it Greenland or something where you have to take food in? You take your own food
Greenland.
in?
That's Greenland.
Greenland. Okay.
Greenland, you bring your food in.
Okay, that's where I got that mixed up.
Yeah, Antarctica is different because again, like I said, you're not the only people up there.
It's a lot bigger.
Yeah, it's a lot bigger, much larger operation. And but you get down there, like I've once, my first year down there, I was 98, January of 98. I was still in life support, and I get down there, and they don't have a room for me when I get there. They're like, "Oh, we didn't know you were coming." How the hell did you not know I was coming?
Manifest.
The
whole works.
So again, Chief Master Sergeant Charlie Lucia, who was a maintenance chief at the time, went on to become one of the 109th Command Chiefs that I worked with when I was first sergeant. Down there, rank has its privileges. So senior NCOs would get their own room, right? Air crew would get their own room for crew rest issues. But Charlie was down there as a maintenance chief, and he's like, hey, he can bunk with me. And they're like, oh, Chief, he goes, it doesn't matter. He needs a room. I have another bed in my room. He can bunk with me. And I never forgot that. That was, it was like, no hassle, no muss, no fuss. Put his rank aside. Hey, kid needs a room. Give him a room. So yeah. And Charlie, because I went on with my first sergeant career, he became the command chief towards the end of my time as first sergeant. Just a gentleman, true gentleman, and really, really good at what he does. And that was just, my one interesting experience down there. But, when you get in January, it can be actually warmer there than it is here in upstate New York in January. Mm-hmm. And there've been times where, you communicate to home through, whatever, back then, AOL Messenger or whatever you were using. And so, well, it's like 20 degrees here today. Oh, geez, it's 40 here in Antarctica. The maintenance guys are out without their shirts on. They're just working in t-shirts or in a blouse with no jacket or, nothing, something like that. Cause it get warm down there. But, I would go down. So I did life support, like I said, until, I went on life support rotations, 98, 99, 2000. 2000. I did. Because 98 and 99 I did life support rotations. And then in 99 I went twice. I went in January of 99 as a life support guy, and then went down in December of 99 as the first sergeant. Mm-hmm. But I hadn't been to the first sergeant's academy yet. But back then things were a little loose. So they were like, well, you can go. Anyways, the first sergeant, we need somebody to do New Year's. Nobody wants to do New Year's. So we worked it out the way the schedule worked, that we left New York, and I have to figure it out, but we left New York so that we were able to be in Christchurch New Zealand for New Year's Eve. We landed in Christchurch because you lose a day going over, you gain a day coming back.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we left New York, I think on December 30th. No. Yeah, I think it might have been December 30th. So 29th, I think it was. Whatever it is. You lose a day. So long and short of it is we landed in Christchurch in the afternoon of New Year's Eve. It was perfect. New Year's Eve, 1999. Think about it. It's the millennium, right?
That was the
Everybody's
one.
dealing with Y2K back home.
All the power's going to go off.
Oh my God.
Everything.
So I went with one of my very good friends from the unit, Scott Hansen, and Scott actually replaced me as the first sergeant, because the Air Force has term limits on the first sergeant. So when my time was done, he became the next first sergeant of the squadron. But at the time he was in life support. He was in life support at the time. He originally was a loadmaster, and that's how we became friends. I was up teaching at the Cool School his first year in the unit when he came over, I think from the Navy. I think he came over from, and he had to go to Cool School, and that's how we became friends at Cool School. And he was a loadmaster, and then he moved over to life support and became a full-time technician. And so we went down together, and we were able to. So we said, okay, let's grab a nap real quick, and then we'll go out for New Year's Eve. It's New Year's Eve. We're going to be in the first time zone to experience the new millennium, right? So there was a place in Christchurch, and I was told that in the 2015 earthquakes that it was completely destroyed, which is awful. But there's a bar called the Bog, BOGG, and you could get obviously actually Guinness on tap, of course, but you could also get Kilkenny on tap. Now, I don't know if anybody's had Kilkenny, but it's like, I always joke around. I say Guinness is like a loaf of bread squeezed in a glass. Well, Kilkenny is like a half a loaf of bread, but it's really great beer. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if you can get it here or not. I've had it brought back to me from New Zealand. But we went to this place, and then we just bar hopped all up and down the main drag of Christchurch and celebrated. And there was actually a bar, I forget the name of it, that had a live feed to the internet. And that's the bar we were at when the clock struck midnight. Mm-hmm. And they were giving out champagne bottles like this big to everybody to pop at midnight. It was really, really, really cool. And so the next day we're just like, we are so hungover, right? And he wants to go golfing the next day. Scott does. So we're just like, come on, let's go golfing. We got to golf on New Year's Day. I'm like, okay, why not? So we go to the golf course across the street from the hotel. Nice course. I had just started golfing back then. I was really, really, really bad. And so Scott, we rent clubs, right? Now I'm left-handed, so that's always fun to try to find left-handed golf clubs to rent. So I rent clubs, we do, and we go out golfing. And actually, I got to admit, for as much as we drank and for as hungover as I was, it didn't really feel that bad. But I'm hitting the ball, and I'm like, why am I always short? I'm like, I should be why am I not hitting the ball as far as I normally do? Like with this specific club, you should be hitting a ball certain distance, right? And so we go a couple holes, and I'm like, and I'm bitching and complaining. And Scott's like, what's your problem? And I go, why am I always, I feel like I'm always short with every club. What's the problem? And he looks at me and he goes, did you factor in the fact that this golf course is in meters?
I figured you were going to say
I'm like,
metric.
No.
You lose that
He's
much
like,
for every yard.
You dumbass. He goes, no wonder you're hitting everything 15 to 20 yards short. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay.
So your calculations were correct.
Just for yards, sure. Yeah. So just another little nugget of fun down there.
In 1999 New Year's, we had ourselves a hog house party.
Okay.
And, of course, hog house, at first, those that don't know, it's an old hog farrowing barn on our acreage that we bought. We turned it into a rec room. It's basically a cowboy bar. It's been growing for 32 years. But, so I went outside right before midnight, and I went to the main circuit breaker, because everybody's worried about Y2K and power. So we shut the power down right at midnight, shot a couple shotguns off, and everybody's like, "What the heck's going on inside in the hog house there?" That was our.
And then you flipped it
That was
back on,
fun.
and
Then we flipped
everything
it
was
on.
fine, right?
Everything's fine.
Everybody was so worried about Y2K. Oh, it's going to be the computers, this, that. And it was like, okay, look back on it, it's like, wow, that was a lot of nothing. But I guess you prepare, right?
Tons of preparation, because
Yeah.
a lot of what they were worried about, I believe, was, the dates were 2-digit day, month, and year. And the 2-digit year, I guess, was part of the issue. They didn't have 4-digit years.
Correct.
Something like that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it was. And there was a lot of, once they recognized that, because again, computers were invented in the 1900s and nobody really thought about, what the hell happens in the year 2000? And that's what the run up was, as I understood it, was a lot of software had to be rewritten for it to say, for it to accept the 4-digit year. And that's exactly what it was. Everybody thought we were going to be going back to 1900 kind of thing. But yeah, that was, and again, it's interesting because at my state police career at the time, everybody was so worried about it. We actually got the next telephones, the beep beep phones, because they were worried we were going to lose cellular technology, but we'd be able to have walkie-talkie technology. Right. So the detail that I was on at the time, they got these purchased through a grant and all of that, and then it turned out it was big to do about nothing, and everything was fine, right. But yeah, that was. But Antarctica was. It's a phenomenal mission. Do you fly? There's a book out. Talks about the Antarctica mission. It was written by one of our pilots, Lieutenant Colonel Joe Hathaway. If you ever get the chance to read it, it's called Ski Bird. I forget the exact name of the title, but great book. Talks about the birth of the Antarctica mission from the 109th perspective, and kind of the 109th, becoming an Arctic mission back in the 70s when we got the C-130s, the original A model C-130s, and then I don't know if they were A models or D models. They were a 3-bladed prop. They were gone when I got there. We had the H models, C-130s then. But yeah, it's a great book. Joe really digs into the history of the 109th, the history of the polar mission, how we got Antarctica. Just a great read. And he's a good man too. When I was the first sergeant on a Puerto Rico deployment, towards the end of my Puerto Rico time, he was our deployment commander. Another true gentleman, funny dude too. But yeah, that mission. Once that mission hit the base just exploded. I remember being a guardsman, going out there as a guardsman on a drill weekend. You knew everybody. Just a drill weekend, you knew everyone. But once Antarctica hit, and all these folks came in from active duty, and the debate, I forget how, just in life support, I forget how many people in life support. We only had, when I got there were 7 people in the shop. You had an E8, an E7, an E6, 2 E5s, and 2 E4s. And 3 positions were full-time, 4 were guardsmen. I don't even know how big the shop is now, but it just exploded with all the USAP positions, they called them, the USAP AGR positions. Then you had state AGRs, and you had federal technicians, and of course more guardsmen. But that mission just, I did it for, like I said, I did it for 3 rotations, 2 rotations as a life support guy, and then the rest of the time I was the first sergeant. And once I went to First Sergeant Academy in spring of 2000, I put my diamond on. They asked me to become the program manager for the position for Antarctica, to be the program manager. So I was basically responsible for, it was really done, a lot of it was done ad hoc at that point. They really didn't have a first sergeant on the ice. They just kind of had a senior NCO that handled it, but they realized, hey, we got to kind of professionalize this position, this specific position, personnel matters, things like that, and we want to have a first sergeant. That's what first sergeants are. Your people is your business, right? And so they say, like, well, look, it's really not, we're not giving it to Dave Kolb. We're giving the responsibility to the wing first sergeant, the ops group first sergeant, which in my guard unit and in C-130 units, on the Manning document, the airlift squadron first sergeant was also responsible for the enlisted personnel that were assigned to ops group headquarters, the enlisted personnel that were assigned to, we had an operational support flight, like your intel folks, your flight management people. I know it's all changed, but this is going back, early 2000s.
Some of it's very similar.
Yeah. And then your enlisted personnel who were physically assigned to the airlift wing headquarters. Those enlisted people were also under the airlift squadron first sergeant. And that the thought process at the time was that all enlisted personnel should have a first sergeant to report to. If there's not one in their specific unit, because you had to have a minimum of 50 people in your enlisted people in your unit to have a first sergeant line number, then you still had a first sergeant. So even though I was down in the ops building was where my office was, where the airlift squadron was, and the ops group was, and the OSF was, I still had to go up to building 1, which was wing headquarters, because I had enlisted people up there as well. So they said it goes to this position. So that was kind of how it came to me personally. I was just in that billet at the time. And so between us, we had a first sergeant's council. And I said, look, this isn't really, I said, okay, yeah, I'm kind of the guy because I'm in this billet, but this is really a wing responsibility. We need input from everybody. So maintenance group maintenance squadron first sergeant, the AMXS squad, first sergeant, medical group, for all of us collectively. I can't remember at the time, we had like 7 or 8 of us on base. We had some really smart people in that room. So collectively we built this program. And I moved on to, again, as I was the program manager, I was responsible to go down on Advon. So that's why I was no longer in January. I was going down in late September, early October. And, you did all the first sergeants did all the billeting down in McMurdo. So you did all the billeting for maintenance and air crew and ops and support people. And then you would also try to recruit and train augmentees. I had first sergeants from other guard units come because not everybody, the 109th we couldn't fill that billet for the whole season down there.
I was going to say, because we've had in the South Dakota Guard, safety guy and airfield management guy that had gone down there. I think one or both. One of them, I think, maybe had met you personally going down through there. So I knew that you had invites where other people could go out and help the mission, because your folks would maybe get tired of the monotony or whatever. I don't know what word to use, but to have to go down there so often, get them some relief.
The USAP folks, the U.S. Antarctica Program full-timers, the AGRs, that was what they were hired for. So they were expected to do X amount of weeks on the ice. And I forget what that number was. And then from there, within the unit, it was back, spots were backfilled by, technicians if they wanted to go in guard status, because you had to be in Title 10 status to go there, because it's OCONUS, and guardsmen. So, not a lot of guardsmen could take off 4 weeks at a time, to go. I mean, for 10 years, I think I averaged like a 45 to 50 day deployment every year for like 10 years, between doing it in life support and then doing it as a first sergeant, 8 to 10 years there span. So, and that's nothing compared to what some of these guys were doing. So that's nothing spectacular. It's just, for my little world, it was a lot, but they would augment, maintenance guys. If they were 130 qualified, they could, we had maintenance guys from other units come down. We had life support guys from other units. We had a first sergeant. Like I said, we had guys at the clinic, folks that would come down the clinic from other units. They would augment, the 109th, and it worked out great. Again, I don't know where it stands now, because it's been so long since I've been retired. I know it changed towards the end of my time. It was, when they came out with it fell under PACAF, which is now PACOM, and I know that those folks are stationed full-time at Hickam in Hawaii, and then they've got people that go down. So I know it's all changed. So if the stuff I'm talking about is quite dated, I apologize. But it's, like I said, my last deployment to the ice was 2005. Yeah, 2005, because I left, because my time as a first sergeant was up in the spring of 06. So I left and went back to life support as an E8, because by that time I had made E8. I went to life support as an E8, and then So 06, 07, I was in life support, and then they asked me to interview for the human resources advisor position on the wing, and I got that, and I finished out my career doing that. And then 2009, it was time to go. My state police career was just so busy, and I was back in college at the time, and I just knew it was just time. You know, like I say, everybody knows when it's time to go, and it was just time to go.
Right.
It was just time to go. You know,
Well, you had a good career, fulfilled a lot of things, had a lot of recognition.
Great career, and traveled all over the world. You know, I went to England on active duty with Eric Downing. I went to Germany in '96 when we were flying Kosovo missions, and I went to Germany and with a guy named Brian Sedgwick, who I'm good friends with. He lives right up here in New Lebanon, and he was a full-time fab guy for life. You know, and I know the career fields have now merged, but prior to the merge, you had life support and you had fabrication. And Brian was the full-time fab guy up there. But the cool thing about Brian speaks fluent German.
Oh, nice.
So Brian, because he was stationed at Rhine Mine in the early 80s. So when this trip came up in '96, spring of '96, Brian's like, hey, we need to go on this. It was great. I had a full-time interpreter. It was awesome. And, you know, he knew the customs, he knew the culture. It was fantastic. I can't remember how many weeks we were deployed to Germany. But we went into Rhine Mine, Frankfurt, and our clinic folks stayed in Frankfurt, and then some folks from Rhine Mine came up and picked us up and drove us down there. And because they were all 130 units, so we worked on 130s for a few weeks down there. And that was a phenomenal trip. I mean, it's just my military experiences. I've deployed all over the world. It's just been phenomenal. Just you know, I've been to 45 of the 50 states. You know, it's been amazing. And to do it, you know, to have two. I mean, for a while I had two full-time careers. I mean, especially when I was a first sergeant, I had two full-time careers. I remember sitting in my driveway, talking on my cell phone to the first sergeant who was down on the ice at the time. Now, you got to remember, during the season, that's an 18-hour difference. So I would go out to my car and sit in my car and talk to. They have a question. Call me. If you call me during this time to this time, and if my phone rings and I see the number, I'll recognize it's an out of area number. I'll go sit in my car, and, you know, because my kids were babies at the time, you know, I'll go sit in the car and talk to you, and we'll figure it out, you know. And I'd have all my paperwork, and yeah, for quite a while. I mean, for quite a period of time, it was two full-time careers. And but you know, I loved my military experience, and you know, the funny thing, you know, was the 109th, we'd call it the home for wayward troopers, because there was a lot of state troopers out there who were guardsmen. And so, you know, I'd see these guys during the week, and then on guard drill, we'd all just hang out together. We'd all be there doing our thing. Some guys are load masters, some guys are life support, some guys were maintenance. It just all over the base, and be like, hey, what's up, bro? How are you? You know?
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue to move into the state police portion of your story, because I know there's a lot to unwrap there too.
How do you talk about 31 years? How do you talk about, like I told you at the beginning of this, I've lived my life stream, right? I either wanted to pitch for the Yankees or I wanted to be a state trooper. Now, my pitching career was not that great. And any of you guys watching that used to light me up like Times Square, you can be able to tell Jim, I was not a good pitcher. Okay. But I love baseball. I'm very passionate about baseball. And I always just joke around. Yeah. If my pitching career doesn't work out, I'll go be a state trooper. Well, I was blessed to have two amazing careers. My military career was everything I wanted it to be and more. My state police career was everything I wanted it to be and way more.
Well, I hope you enjoyed part one of Dave's story. Part two will be coming up, and I hope you tune in for that. And there's going to be some incredible stories there, including a 911 experience. So I hope you tune in to watch that one as well. Thank you.